Committee Room 29, sound. 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 Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee Room 20.
Okay. Okay, we just welcome everybody who is joining us today to the Committee for Infrastructure. I'm just informing those in attendance in the public gallery. Anyone, you can use your mobile device through a Wi-Fi connection. All devices should be muted. Password details are available on the gallery rules for anybody wanting to connect to Wi-Fi network. 3G, 4G and 5G should not be used, and no recordings or photographs are to be taken. So if members are content, we'll proceed through the agenda as follows. Apologies. I'm not aware of any apologies. Mark might be late joining us just. Okay. Declarations of interest remind members that they are obliged to declare any relevant financial or other interests which might reasonably be thought by others to influence their approach to the matter under consideration. Any members who have interest to declare in relation to today's business should do so now or when the particular matter arises during the meeting. So does any member have any interest that they wish to declare? Yeah, Cahill?
Yeah, Chair, I have a family member who works in DFA, so
okay.
Some of that coming up today maybe.
Anybody else? I just want to declare an interest just in relation to the A5. A family member of my husband's lives along that route. Okay, chairperson's business. I just want to say very briefly, obviously we're aware of the school bus incident that happened, and I suppose from a committee perspective we do welcome that there is going to be an investigation that will take place in relation to that, and we do want to send our good wishes to all that were involved in that incident during the week. Alright. Draft minutes, page 8, draft minutes of the proceedings for the meeting on the 2nd of October 2024. I'm seeking agreement that members are content that the minutes are a true and accurate reflection of the meeting on the 2nd of October 2024. If so, I'll sign the minutes now. Content?
Right.
Okay, matters arising. At page 13, you'll see correspondence from the National Franchise Dealers Association providing further information in response to oral evidence from Department for Infrastructure officials at the meeting on the 2nd of October. I remind members that following the evidence from DFI, the committee agreed that it was content to recommend that the Vehicle Emissions Trading Schemes Amendment Order 2024 be approved by the Assembly. So I'm asking members if they are content to note the correspondence or if they have any further information or clarification that is required. Content? Okay, thank you. Correspondence, at page 17 you'll see the correspondence memo. At page 245 there's item 6.13. It's an invitation to the launch of the Centre for Public Policy Administration at Queen's University Belfast on Friday the 25th of October. So any members that are wishing to attend should respond to the organisers directly. Alright. At page 253 item 6.14, an update on the older persons Parliament to be held on Saturday the 12th of October, this Saturday. Advise members that members have been invited to join a meet and greet in advance of the event, and any members wishing to participate should contact the clerk. I'm asking members if they have any comment or want to raise any issue on any other item of correspondence. All content? Okay. So I'm seeking agreement that members are content to note the correspondence and the remaining suggested actions as contained in the correspondence memo in the meeting pack. Okay, we'll now move on to item 7, which is a draft programme for government 2024-2027, Department for Infrastructure, oral evidence. At page 292, you'll see the clerk's memo, draft programme for government 2024-27, Department for Infrastructure, oral evidence. At page 297, draft programme for government 2024-27, Department for Infrastructure, written evidence. And at page 303, draft programme for government 2024-2027, our plan, doing what matters most. So welcome to the committee this morning, Ms Alison Clydesdale, Director of Water and Drainage Policy for Department for Infrastructure, Mrs Rosemary Daly, Director of Regional Planning, Governance and Legislation, Department for Infrastructure, and Liam McAvoy, Director of Road Asset Development, Department for Infrastructure. So you're very, very welcome again to the committee. We appreciate your time this morning. I'm seeking agreement that the evidence today is recorded by Hansard. All agreed, yeah? Okay, so as per usual, just a brief opening statement, if you don't mind, for about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to come to members' questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to come here today to brief the committee about the draft programme for government, and in particular those elements that fall within the remit of the Department for Infrastructure. So, and thank you for your introductions. Within these opening remarks, I'll just briefly outline how the Department for Infrastructure has contributed to the development of the draft PFG, the relevance of the draft PFG to DFI, and how DFI or the PFG, whenever it's finalised, will shape the work of the department going forward. So, as you're aware, as a cross-cutting document, the draft PFG extends beyond the remit of individual departments. It sets out the executive priorities to tackle the key challenges facing the public and to better build a better future for everyone. The Department for Infrastructure has been involved in the collaborative process of compiling the draft PFG through engagement with the Executive Office. We have worked collectively across our senior teams in the department to identify those relevant DFI policies and actions which will contribute to the PFG priority areas, with a particular focus on ensuring that the draft PFG appropriately recognises the essential role of infrastructure as an enabler. As you'll be aware, the draft PFG proposes 9 top priorities, and 4 of those directly relate to DFI, to the work of DFI. Those are growing a globally competitive and sustainable economy, providing a more social, affordable and sustainable housing, protecting Lough Neagh and the environment, and reforming and transforming our public services. Now, with regard to reform and transformation, the draft PFG commits the Executive to investing in public infrastructure and shaping how our services are delivered. When the Minister was here at committee a couple of weeks ago, he echoed this when he talked about how infrastructure is key to unlocking a more productive and prosperous economy, addressing regional balance and supporting the delivery of housing growth over the longer term. He also spoke about the department finding new ways to make the best use of what we have and focusing how we can do as much as we can with the resources and budget that we have. Within the written briefing, we've listed the DFI-led actions, so I'll not repeat them now, but happy to discuss them when we get to questions. These actions are not all of the actions that the department will be taking forward over the coming years. The draft PFG doesn't include everything that the departments intend to do, but rather it sets a strategic direction for departments and helps us to plan ahead and get ready to deliver on those executive priorities. So, just looking ahead, the PFG will be finalised following the ongoing consultation exercise, which extends to the 4th of November, and when that final PFG is in place, the budgeting process thereafter will prioritise those commitments made in PFG, and that budget prioritisation will help departments, including ourselves, shape our future programmes and business planning for the rest of the mandate, and we would look forward to working with yourselves as we shape those programmes in the coming months. So happy to take any questions, and given the broad scope of our responsibilities, we'll do our best to answer whatever questions you have today.
Super, thank you very much. So we'll just go straight into questions. What specific legislative change does the Department anticipate will be required to enable the delivery of programme for government priorities?
Yeah, if you can.
Just in relation to water, obviously a couple of the programme for government priorities cut across the provision of sustainable housing and the economy. And in relation to water and connection of housing, obviously the Minister has asked us to look at a range of options as to how we might bring forward developer contributions, which may or may not require legislative change. But if they do, obviously that would be something that the Minister then would bring forward in due course. So on my side, that would be the main one, as well as the water, flooding and sustainable drainage bill, which you're already aware of, which will help the SUDs. So on the water side, that would be the two main pieces of legislation coming forward. I don't know if we have any other on planning.
Obviously, in the planning remit, we're working through the planning improvement programme, and that obviously has a number of various legislative changes that will come through. For example, the validation checklist was just presented last week. We're now working on the development management regulations to obviously look at those. Consultation has taken place last year. We have we're undergoing a process to summarise the responses to that, to identify the best way to change the legislation. There will be a number of things, like legislation change is always an option in terms of improving the processes and transformation. So we are going through that through the planning improvement programme. We obviously have a legislative team in our section that looks at the best ways and where you can tweak and make better the legislation. Specifically at this point in time, the secondary legislation, the guidance and the regulations, where we can do that as efficiently and effectively as possible to ensure that we can deliver.
And just in terms of, from a transport point of view more generally, obviously, I said there are slightly fewer specific actions in terms of transport infrastructure within the document, but generally lots of our existing programmes will work towards the key priorities of the document in terms of ensuring that we have got a well-maintained, safe and reliable transport network. So generally, in terms of specific question about what particular legislation, as Rosemary was saying, there is ongoing review of what legislation we require to deliver those established programmes, and anything specific that might come out of that would shape what legislation we would perhaps need to adapt going forward.
How confident are you that timescales on those legislative changes that you've laid out there will match the timescale of the document for programme for government?
On the water side, on the water, flooding and sustainable drainage bill, we briefly previously on that, and we're hoping to introduce that at the end of this year or early next year. So hopefully that leaves us enough time with the rest of this mandate to get that bill through. So that's on track and being drafted as we speak. The developer contributions, we need to establish first if legislation is required, and then we need to decide which would be the best option to bring that forward. So we wouldn't have a timescale for you just at the moment.
That's what I was just going to add, that legislation is one mechanism in delivering the transformation, but there's also other things such as policy and guidance that we can also look at. Legislation is obviously the highest part of it. It's probably the most extensive and time-consuming part of it, so if there's a different way we can do it, we're certainly looking at those options as well.
And in terms from a transport point of view, again, say the established programmes that we will have will make significant contributions to delivering these priorities. So we're generally content that the legislation required to deliver those programmes is already well established and in place.
So we have legislative change, funding issues, workforce, and I noted in one of in your written in correspondence received to the committee, it states that there are 566 vacancies in the Department for Infrastructure. This is the third highest across 10 departments, and in terms of percentage of workforce, it's actually the highest at 19% in terms of vacancies. So are you aware of what areas will be mostly impacted by this and how that will impact upon delivery of programme for government?
Well, maybe in the first instance, I can take it from the CRAM side of you. I think whenever Colin Woods was here previously, he'd articulated to you that level of vacancy that the department is carrying, particularly within our group within the department, and it does impact on what we can deliver. We do recognise the scale of the vacancies that we're carrying, and also the forward. The age profile of our department going forward. You know, there is work in place where we are taking active considerations as to how we deal with those issues. So there is an ongoing established people programme which is looking to bring the necessary resources in. There's a few recruitment programs that are ongoing at the moment. There was an SPTO program that has recently yielded, I think, 60 new SPTO posts. There are a couple of other programs in more detail level that are ongoing at the moment and will be progressed over the next 6 months or so. So my part of the department and the wider department is looking specifically at that. There are challenges in terms of getting the necessary professional and technical staff in. It's a very competitive marketplace for some of those. But yeah, we're looking hard to explore opportunities to make sure that we have those in place.
And I would concur with
Briefly,
that,
yeah.
that there's a concerted effort to fill existing vacancies where possible. Just to add that I'm only I've recently joined, so that's one of those vacancies that's been recently filled. And obviously there's efforts to get people into position, both through admin and professional grades as well. And there's a number of competitions about to be released for the planning side. So
the department has a dedicated director of people development, so if you would like, we could ask for her to give you a written briefing or write to you with what she's outlining as part of a wider plan, if that was helpful.
Yeah, I think a written briefing would be really useful in relation to that. That would be great. I do want to move, just conscious of time, so if you don't mind, we will try and keep questions and answers as short as possible. So I want to move to the Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for coming along today. Just following up from the Chair's points in terms of pressures, many of the priorities around the department, including transit and Northern Ireland Water, as you know, require significant investment. How realistic are those priorities, and what funding opportunities are the department exploring to try and plug the gaps that are noticeable there?
Well, on Northern Ireland Water, the Minister has this year allocated some about £500 million to Northern Ireland Water in its entirety, with the capital programme of £328 million. So the investment need for Northern Ireland is well known and documented through the price control process. The Minister, I think, is on record saying he has been discussing this with executive colleagues and is trying to get additional funds. In a situation where we have a slightly reduced budget, that just means that the projects won't stop. They will just take longer to be completed, so they will be completed over a longer period of time in a constrained budget situation. So things will continue, but just at a slightly slower pace.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the vacancies in the workplace, can you just outline which specific areas or sectors within the department are being most hamstrung in terms of the ability to deliver because of those vacancies?
I think we would probably need to come back to you. Our Director of
Okay.
People would probably be best to come back to you on that in writing. That would be a specific area that she was looking at.
Okay. Final one then, Chair. In terms of the wellbeing indicators within the programme for government, mental health, life satisfaction and suitable housing, both new and old, are key target indicators. How does the department square that with the fact that tens of thousands of people are living in unadopted roads and developments across Northern Ireland, and what is being done by the department to alleviate those problems, given the fact that some have been sitting in developments for over 20 years without any movement between the developer and the Department for Infrastructure?
In relation to unadopted water infrastructure, that is of course private drainage infrastructure for which Northern Ireland Water has no responsibility. The developer should have entered into a bond with the developer. In some cases, developers have gone out of business, and that is unable to be fixed. So before Northern Ireland Water can adopt that infrastructure, it does need to be brought up to an adoptable standard, and that does fall to either the developer, or if the developer is no longer there or no longer trading, then it does fall to the residents.
Yeah, but you can understand then why that's an absolute disaster for the residents who have bought a house in good faith. The bond is invariably never enough to cover the works that need to be carried out, and ultimately it's the Department for Infrastructure's officials who are the ones who have road adoption officers in place. So surely something more needs to be done by the department to ensure that either unscrupulous developers or developers who go bust for whatever variety of reasons don't just leave residents in limbo for decades upon decades. Would that not be something in terms of programme for government and those wellbeing indicators that should be looking at?
Yeah, I do recognise the stresses that situation.
Huge, yeah.
We are well aware of the extent of the number of housing developers that have ended up in that situation, but I think it is also important to recognise that there are many that do make its way through the process successfully and be adopted. This is quite a significant workload that we're doing. I think even within the past 6 months there have been 200 individual bonds that have been adopted, so we are working hard in this sphere. We do recognise the difficulty, but as you say, there are certain circumstances or certain situations where unfortunately this situation has arisen, and like I say, generally say the responsibility for providing that infrastructure to a certain level, the responsibility is on the department, is on the developer. The department has got powers there for enforcement, and we would engage those as appropriate, but in general for many of the successful adoptions, the engagement directly with identifying the particular defect and working with contractors and developers to get those resolved has been successful in a lot, although I do absolutely take your point, there's still much more that needs
As
to
a
be
final
done
point,
here.
Chair, I appreciate that many go without any problem whatsoever, and that's great for those that live in them, but there are over 3,000 roads and developments, 3,000 across the country that remain unadopted, some for over 20 years. That's not going to be done by the developer, and those people can't sell those houses often or even get them valued, and are sitting without sewage facilities, light facilities and road repairs. And I think it's incumbent on the department to look to do more to try and ensure this doesn't happen going forward, but we'll follow that up again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Cahill?
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you very much for the presentation. Just three questions, if I may. Just outline, obviously I know that it's out for consultation, and maybe there'll come some good ideas out of that when we finalise it. But my main point is, what's the major challenges you find now? Obviously you've outlined what you'd like to achieve, but I mean your major challenges. The second part of that question is, outside the financial issue, how are you going to work with partners to try and deliver some of those? And then my third final point, Chair, is the issue in terms of the wellbeing framework. I mean, what will the EFI take the lead on, and how will you work with partners to try and deliver on those? Okay, thank you. That's three questions. You need to repeat it, you're happy enough, yeah?
No, that's fine.
Okay, yeah.
I do you want me to start on the water side then, maybe if we just do it inside. On the water side then, in terms of the major challenges. So the major challenges are obviously the scale of investment that is needed. I think everybody recognises the scale of investment is needed, and matching that to the funding that is available, which does mean that investment will take longer, completion of projects will take longer. In terms of working with partners on the water side, we work with a lot of partners on the water side, obviously Northern Ireland Water, the councils. The department is very keen, and has always been very keen with councils to promote the use of sustainable drainage systems to help relieve some of the pressure on the systems as well. So we work with, we're actually working with some devolved administrations and looking at how they look after the maintenance of SUDS development. So we work with partners across the board really on that. In relation to the wellbeing framework, obviously the four areas of the PFG that most directly relate to DFI cut across quite a few of the wellbeing indicators, and obviously the provision of sustainable housing and wellbeing and mental health is part of that. That process will be led probably by TEO, so the department will be guided by TEO in that respect in terms of how we engage in that going forward. We don't know on the roadside.
In terms of, again, on the roadside, the major challenge will be the level of funding that's required. Obviously, one of the key priorities within this document is for us to keep our infrastructure well maintained, to keep it safe, to keep it reliable, and to keep it resilient. So a major challenge within that will be to secure the necessary funding to allow that to happen. I think you've been well briefed previously in terms of the challenges within that. The level of funding that we currently get for maintaining our road network falls well below previous guidance as to say what is required. Obviously we're continuing to operate a limited service in terms of that maintenance. That would be a key challenge in that regard. In terms of other improvements going forward, like I say, some of our major road improvement schemes will make a significant contribution to this. Some of those are we would work extensively with other partners in engaging with those, and obviously there was announcements with regard to city deal projects recently, but again, in terms of some of those city deals, those are key avenues and opportunities which will allow us to secure some funding. So for example, on the Belfast region city deal, the Lurgan bridge, going ahead there, there are mechanisms within those that again we will be seeking to maximise the opportunities of what we can do to deliver those important infrastructure improvements.
Okay, I suppose from a planning perspective, you'll all know there's many challenges. One of the things obviously is significant delays in the processing of applications, and obviously the department are taking that issue very seriously, looking at statutory consultations, looking at different mechanisms to introduce how we can fast track or speed up the processes. The other challenge I feel is the complexity of things in planning has significantly increased. We've got more policies to adhere to, we've more guidance, we've legislation that's applicable to certain types of development. We've got key players now, we've got political engagement, we've got local engagement, much more in the process. So it's getting that balance. So it's realising to deliver decisions, you have to take account of absolutely everything. So that leads to a lot of complexity. That in itself then obviously adds to the resources issue in planning as well. Obviously, we already engage with quite a lot of key partners in the process through the planning improvement programme. In the two-tier system, the department obviously has a role to play, as do the council. So it's actually working together instead of a two-tier. Let's get the tier combined in a certain way that we can work together to deliver what is best for the region. Improvements going forward is to build on what has been delivered so far in the planning improvement programme, possibly to take a refocus. My plan would be to actually start to engage with each council individually, because across the region, whilst we're a small region, there's still a lot of different issues in each council area. So it's really identifying what those issues are and what's the best way to take improvements forward so they're actually meaningful to help the process along. So that would be really it in summary.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Cathal. I'm moving to Stephen now.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, folks, for the presentation. Just a couple of questions. The first one, I'll just pick up where you left off in terms of planning. Obviously, we have 11 different councils, and that often results in 11 different experiences for both agents and applicants, often leading to frustration. Amongst that, what more can be done, I suppose, to coordinate that better? I think the experience for agents and applicants, and also the statutory consultees issue about the delay in that and the timing. One of the biggest frustrations is often, the government consultate responses. So, what action, do you propose to take on that?
What we're proposing to is this is part of our individual engagement, is to understand what is working really well and what isn't working well. So it's actually taking the best practice from the councils that are working well, because there's some aspects of each council they're delivering really well on.
Yeah.
Some aren't delivering so well, but there might be something else in their council that they are delivering particularly well on. So it's really understanding each council and trying to apply in our oversight role, trying to apply good practice across the board and assist the councils in saying, if you were to put this action in place, would that help? So it's really taking a look at the systems and the systems of each council and try and get the systems to sort of align closer to achieve what we need them to do.
Yeah, I do appreciate that, and the variation, it can be frustrating. It can be regional variation, it can be beneficial, but it can be 11 different experiences for applicants and agents. Just on the statutory consultees, what action does Department propose to push for better time frames?
One of the things that you'll be aware that the Minister has talked about is the transformational bit, and part of that is actually to lever funding to support the statutory consultees, so that statutory consultees can be properly resourced to respond effectively and efficiently to planning decisions.
Yeah, okay. And just on the wider issue then, two of the key themes within the PFG, growing the economy and providing more homes, obviously sound good, but they're going to have they're hugely impacted by the ongoing wastewater capacity issues. I suppose the question is, it's something that the construction sector certainly have been raising more and more so about, I think it's fair to say, catastrophic impact that it is currently having and will have in the short to medium term. I suppose the question is, does the department recognise the scale of the challenge that lies ahead? And how confident are you that real progress can be made on this major issue?
Yes, so the Department and the Minister absolutely recognise that, and that is why the Minister has asked us to look as to how we might be able to facilitate developer contributions going forward, and that's currently a work stream that's ongoing at the moment, looking at both the legislative framework that exists and the regulatory framework, and bringing forward to him options very shortly on that.
And what about the level of engagement with the sector? How regular is that take place at department level?
The Minister has met with CEF and a lot of the other similar organisations in relation to this, and heard and listened to their concerns, which again is why we've started the work stream on developer contributions.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Peter now.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for coming in, everybody, for your presentation today. I've got a couple of questions, so I'm going to rattle through them. Developer contributions has been brought up. So what do we have any figures as to what kind of impact that's going to have? I mean, obviously there's a lot of money that needs to be invested into introducing sites, improving sites. Do we actually expect this to have an impact? What impact will that have financially, if there's any estimates? And what's the reaction been from developers?
So that there aren't any impacts. We're at the very beginning of this process, assessing if there is a requirement for legislation. Once we have established that, then we will look at the impact. So there are two categories, if you like, of developer contributions. So, and this is why we Northern Water urge developers to contact them in the first place. So there would be a category of developments that could have some capacity relieved if the developer invests in stormwater offsetting, which would involve them either doing some natural solutions or putting in some additional sewers to offset that storm water. Then there's another set of constraints around just Northern Ireland Water's own infrastructure in terms of pumping stations and wastewater treatment works, and they would need increase in capacity, and the developer contributions are wanting to contribute to that. And that's the bit that we're looking at the minute in terms of the legislation and the regulatory framework around that. But we haven't looked at that in detail yet.
So I suppose we're looking, this is my assessment, we're looking potentially at a solution that could come in the next couple of years, but we don't actually know if it'll have a significant impact or if the impact would be a lot more minor.
Well, it would have an impact, I guess, for those developers who were able to make that contribution. It would allow the capacity to be relieved in potentially an area in relation to their housing development. So that would be the immediate impact.
What size of developers would that be? Is that the big developers? Would that be a lot more localised?
Well, and that's
the big players within the system?
That's what we're looking at across the board, because it is important that we look at the impacts across all sizes of developers and all sizes and all tenures of housing and business as well. So the work is just in very early stages, and that those are the types of things that we're currently looking at.
And then secondly, Rosemary, you had mentioned checklists. Obviously that's been announced by the Minister very, very recently. Do we have any idea as to how many or what sort of impact that could have? What sort of percentage of applications could potentially be a bit more faster streamlined? What sort of role do we think the checklists are going to have?
I think the checklists are going to have a very positive role, because it obviously is going to increase and improve the quality of applications. Often in the planning process, planning officers are in the position that they have to massage applications through the process, so they're constantly going back and saying you need to provide this, you need to provide this. So I suppose from the outset, when the validation checklist is introduced, an applicant will know exactly from day one what they'll need to provide. So for example, a transport assessment or a biodiversity impact assessment would all be provided at the outset, as opposed to midway through the application when it's identified by a statute consultee that this is needed. Statistics-wise, we don't know, but we do know that the quality of applications is an issue, and this is obviously a process and legislation that will assist the councils to improve the quality of applications. So I'd like to be in a position to report back in 12 months' time to see if it's making a difference. We're hoping that it will. It's something that is works across the water, and it is quite an effective way of just getting the applications to a good standard before the planning officers start to process them.
When you say quality of applications, do you mean local, major,
It would
or
apply to all
regionally
of them.
significant?
It would be all of them.
All of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's actually at the council's discretion. We will provide guidance to the councils as to how they should do it. So they have a wee bit of latitude in what they consider. Again, it's back to this point, not one size fits all for each council. So you have to give them that flexibility. Obviously, if you're in a urban area, you're going to have different concerns as opposed to something in a rural area. So they have that wee bit of flexibility with that.
Lastly, Peter.
I have two more. I'll keep it brief and no preambles.
There's training on last week, Joe.
Right. I noted in the document on page 51 it said about additional funding, and then in the next, I think a few sentences down, it said access to borrowing will enable the Northern Ireland Housing Executive to increase investment in its homes. Have we looked at how to sort of say in Northern Ireland Water they're able to access more borrowing powers, but also they may be able to borrow above the RDL and CDL? Has that been looked at? Because we've kind of said we need additional funding for Northern Ireland Water in one breath, and then in the next we've said that the Northern Ireland Housing Executive is going to be remodelled. I mean, have we looked at this for Northern Ireland Water if we've praised it for the Housing Executive?
Yes, we have. They're two very different models, Northern Ireland Water and the Housing Executive. And obviously we work within the Minister's policy parameters, and he's been very clear in saying there would be no water charges. So we are looking at all the options. We have looked at this quite a few years ago, and we're revisiting all of that work again to see if there's anything at all in the existing model that can be tweaked to help. Northern Ireland Water do, of course, have access to government borrowing from DFI.
They can't go beyond their RDL and CDL. Is the point. So they've access to borrowing, they get that, but they're not able to go beyond the limits that are set. That's the point.
That's right, they're not, yes.
So have we looked at maybe trying to, I think I asked this of the Minister recently, have we looked at being able to spend or borrow beyond those? Because that would unlock, hopefully.
We've looked at a range of options a number of years ago, and we're looking again at all of those options, again in collaboration with Northern Ireland Water to see if there is something we can do around the existing model. But again, that's ongoing work at the moment.
Is that publicly available? Can I Google that and find it?
No, that's not publicly available at the moment. The work's not complete yet.
Thank you, Peter. I give you quite a bit of latitude there.
Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Preamble brief. Raw effluent in our rivers is an issue. So how is the department engaging with DAERA in regard to reviewing SORPI?
Yes, SORPI. Yes, well, SORPI is obviously a matter for DAERA and for the DAERA Minister. The Northern Ireland Water are involved in a group, which I just can't quite remember the name of, but they're involved in a group that is reviewing SORPI. And we're hopeful that when the DAERA Minister makes a decision that he will bring that to the DFI Minister for agreement.
Sticking with the wastewater and the cross-cutting issue of it, what discussions are taking place across other departments in order to sort of adequately fund the wastewater treatment?
We work very closely with the Department for the Communities. They are responsible for the housing supply strategy, so the department is represented on that group and feeds into that strategy. We work closely with DOF in relation to the funding and through the normal monitoring round process. Those would be the two departments most affected.
And then finally, just again touching on the planning, what changes, be the legislative, are planned in order, are you looking at in order to deal with climate change?
Climate change, what we're currently looking at, there is a review of the the strategic plan and policy statement to take account of that. That has already was released last year. This is something that will come through in policy. It's something obviously as a collective across the department we are very aware of, and it has to be built into any assessment of applications. It's something that will be delivered through the policy and updated with our frameworks. Something that will be encouraged to be mentioned and delivered in local development policies as well that are coming forward.
Would they look to remove barriers for developing sort of climate change, or sort of ways to ameliorate against climate change, or is that the way it's going?
One of the things is obviously to ensure that the planning system's fit to deliver on decisions for any application for that has obviously implications. Nearly every application will have to consider their impact on climate change. And that's something obviously that's coming through. It's a legislative requirement. We're all trying to work through that. The Department for Infrastructure sets the regional policies. The regional policies should filter down to local policies. So that's how we plan to address it. There's consultations ongoing at the moment that are looking at reducing carbon budgets and all of that sort of those implications. So they're already coming through the consultations. There's 2 consultations already out on the SPBS that are dealing with this. So once that becomes regional policies, local policies have to fit into that hierarchy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the team for coming along today. I think every speaker so far has touched on the developer contributions conundrum, Alison, and we've heard for a few weeks or maybe a month now that it's being explored as to whether legislation is required or not. Now, you've touched on rightly how lengthy the legislative process is itself. Therefore, if that's a journey we have to go on, we need to sort of get setting off soon on it. Just in terms of that, there's an impediment to us getting developer charges here, and that's what you are considering now. The same issue doesn't exist over the border, does it? And I was wondering, is there an existing option where there's infrastructural improvements required in close proximity to the border? Could Northern Ireland Water get the developer to contribute to Irish Water, who could do the work, and Northern Ireland Water could pay them?
So my understanding, it's really an operational matter for Northern Ireland Water, but my understanding in relation to that is that they wouldn't have explored, because obviously their duties and their responsibilities are governed by the legislation that is in place here. There is mechanisms in place to facilitate cross-border funding through the PACE Plus programme, and there's 2 programmes, 2 investment areas, 5.4 and 5.2, that Northern Ireland Water could bid into, but they would be for particular projects, not general upgrades, if you like. They would be generally for particular one-off projects. So that is how they would manage the cross-border element of it.
Okay, thank you, and you're very welcome, Rosemary. You're a recent recruit, whatever you did, I don't know. This everything haven't you?
Life.
You don't have to answer that question. Planning's got so bad it's not just the system in tears. But
still enjoy it.
But now reference was made to the introduction of checklists, and I believe this will indeed go a long way to improving the quality of applications and reducing the length of time it's taken to process them. However, and I had raised this issue with the Minister as well, it's not something you says it'll apply to all applications. It won't apply to regionally significant applications that the department are dealing with, and I'm concerned that these are the applications that generally take the longest to process. They're major applications, or regionally significant. They're the most expensive applications as well. Do you not think there's a risk of appearing to councils like it's a case of do what we say, not what we do?
What I would say with regional significant applications, there's always an opportunity for your pre-application discussions, and you would be engaging with the department at a very early stage if you're doing the thing right. It would be very unusual for any developer that's come with a regionally significant application not to actually have discussions. So they should actually be ahead of the game in terms of providing the quality of information. Normally anybody that is providing advice for regionally significant are usually people that are very responsible, and they are aware of the processes, and they usually do a good job in providing some of that information. There's always going to be information that's provided, and there's always going to be problems that are going to be identified during the process, so it is actually recognised that. Yes, at the minute it doesn't apply to the department, but because of the nature of the applications the department deals with. Now, interestingly, the delays there's many reasons why these take longer, because of the complexity of them, because of the issues they raise, climate change, impacts on communities, the need for the development. economic impacts, and those all have to be very, very carefully assessed. And some of them obviously are referred to public inquiry, which is another source of scrutiny that they have to go through. And there is, as you're probably aware, there is delays in that as well. So the Minister is very much looking at that and looking at the transformation bid to try and circumvent the delays on that end of it. So the department would like to think that, you know, you wouldn't be accepting applications that aren't well supported with the information. So when you get to what I'm trying to say is, when you get to regionally significant, you're not going to come to the department without your environmental impact statement or your noise impact statement, your transport statement. So they should indicatively be there. They are. I mean, and some of them are just caught up in different aspects of the system, which obviously we have to take a look at and see how we're going to reduce those delays.
Yeah, and finally,
Mark, very briefly, thanks.
I like that sort of idea of engaging with councils as well, although best practice is in the eye of the beholder, so that might be difficult to determine as well. But finally, in terms of the PFG itself, my party have been critical of the lack of detailed timelines and targets in it. So how will we as a committee, we as an assembly, and equally importantly, you as officials, actually track the progress and performance?
And speak for planning. But this is where we're actually, part of this engagement is understanding like a framework where we can understand how we are all performing that. Obviously we'll be looking at the department's performance in planning as well. It's not just we are the 12th planning authority, you know, so it's really looking at how, you know, all these measures such as improving the quality of information going into the system should help things move along quicker. There should be less consultations, obviously sufficiently resourcing, looking at what legislative powers we have at the minute we can carry out. So there's different things, but you would ultimately be looking towards how we measure. The department already measure performance of councils is already measured, and there is targets there. Whilst they're not always been met, we have to look at how we can assist.
Yeah, no, that's just the planning part, and then just wider across the department.
And sure,
Thank you.
I like to say the document itself, I think, has been mentioned earlier on in terms of the wellbeing framework that the Executive Office are establishing, and the data that will be gathered through that process will reflect how they measure against their priorities. Like say, as Rosemary said, across the department we've got our own business plan that will sit beneath, or whenever the draft PFG is finalised, we will ensure that our work programmes within our business plan reflect that. Our own business plan will have its own mechanism for measuring and monitoring performance associated with that. But yeah, so there will inevitably be a hierarchy of sort of monitoring, but yeah, the particular one at the highest level, you know, is reflected in the Executive Office wellbeing framework. It seems to be a key aspect.
And just maybe important to just reinforce that obviously the actions in the PFG are not all the actions, as Liam has said, that the Department of Infrastructure will be taken forward. The detail of the Department of Infrastructure's actions again are set out in the business plan. So the PFG doesn't include everything that the department intends to do, but everything that's in the business plan contributes to a PFG priority. So certainly the PFG really is something that's setting the strategic direction for all departments, and then will help us as a department to plan and get ready to deliver those executive priorities.
Super, thank you. Move to Keith.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming along. My question relates to protecting Loughney and the environment. Okay, protecting Loughney and the environment in the PFG. Are you content that NI Water take their part to play seriously and understand fully their part of the problem?
Yes, I am content. Northern Ireland Water were on the group along with ourselves with the Dara Loughney Action Plan. Northern Ireland Water's discharges account for 24% of the discharges into Loughney. That has been looked at. The investment that is required around Loughney has already been identified as part of the price control process. So the investment that is required to upgrade the various wastewater infrastructure around Loughney is known and just needs funded. But Northern Ireland Water's impact is 24% of the overall runoff.
You mentioned the 24%. Where does that 24% come from?
That
So you have 62, 24 and 12.
That's right.
Where does that come from?
So that is a source apportionment figure that the data scientists have worked out. So I may need to go back for further detail in it, but my understanding of it is that DAERA and DAFB working together have looked at the sources that are feeding into Lough Neagh, and those percentages are based on a source apportionment. I think that was set out in the Lough Neagh action plan that was published.
And then final question, if I may. Obviously the 40% drinking water comes from Lough Neagh, and with issues in Ulster and different parts of Northern Ireland with respect to that. And an individual can go to the drinking water inspector at environmental health. Are you 100% sure and content that you are doing enough checks as DFI, that NI Water is doing enough to make sure that water is safe to drink?
So the safety of the water is overseen by various pieces of legislation and by the Drinking Water Inspectorate and by the Public Health Agency. And all of those bodies work very closely with Northern Ireland Water in terms of the testing and the parameters within which they test to ensure that the water is safe to drink. The water is tested, can be tested every day, it can be tested at reservoirs, it can be tested at taps, it can be tested at any point in the system. And both DWI and PHA are content that the water is safe to drink.
You're content that there's enough communication between all those three, we'll call it three organisations, that it is safe to drink?
There absolutely is, and should there be any incidents, Northern Ireland Water have a very efficient emergency incident process where they raise an incident and all of the bodies work together to look at all of that. And in the recent incident, water was being tested every day and never breached any of the parameters and was safe to drink.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We're just in the last few minutes of your evidence session. You might be glad to hear that. But it's just, if members do have, I will take one question, one quick question if you do have one, if you want to indicate to me. But in terms of obviously funding pressures is highlighted quite a bit in this committee, and in programme for government there isn't necessarily the headline which is directly to infrastructure, but there are a lot of references to infrastructure within it. I'm obviously aware, and ministers have mentioned it in the Assembly chamber, about the investment strategy. How closely matched is the investment strategy, because it mainly seems to sit with infrastructure, to the programme for government?
I can take that. I've been involved in some of the investment strategy work, working closely with SIB, who are looking at a number of issues. I'm not aware of the interaction between ISNI and TEO. We would need to go back and check that for you. But the department, as DFI, is working very closely with the folks who are looking after the investment strategy across all of DFI's areas.
Okay. Do you want to
just add that the planning as well, and some of the enablers will relate to planning. So likewise, we're also working with ISNI on devising those enablers for delivery.
Okay, and is there flexibility within that investment strategy, because it seems to be a longer time frame than the programme for government?
Yes, the investment strategy, I understand, looks to a 10-year time frame in terms of planning and understanding what's required.
Okay, I am going to come to other members just very quickly. Peter?
Just briefly, Liam, you had mentioned about city deals when you were speaking earlier. It's came up recently in the committee about BRT2 between South and North Belfast, and I certainly didn't feel confident whenever I left that meeting that we're going to see it delivered. So I just wanted to know maybe what is DFI doing with TransLink to try to make sure that funding the gap exists. I think it's about 100 million, I think. What are we doing to try to make sure that we're able to deliver BRT2?
At the moment, in terms of BRT2, like I say, there's a considerable funding shortfall within that. I think the projection of the projected cost of that is about 148 million pound or something. And within the city deal, I think there's maybe 35 million allocated to it. So at the moment, the minister is keen, reflecting what we had said earlier on, we do as much as we can with what we have. So there is ongoing work at the moment to see how best that 35 million pound that is identified within the city deal can be used. So there are certain elements of that we can work to plan in terms of some of the priority measures that we can get on the road network. So there's an ongoing piece of work which will soon, as I understand it, result in an outline business case for what we can do with that 35 million pound to make sure that we start delivering some of the benefits that will as soon as possible.
100 to 140 million. Whenever I asked the question about who was ever going to provide that money, I think the official we were talking to that day didn't seem to know. Do we actually know who might be able to fund that significant gap?
I said, in terms of those priorities at the moment, I think the Minister is quite keen and committed to this scheme, and he has committed to working with the Executive to explore whatever funding opportunities there might be to plug that shortfall. But yeah.
If you can just get Mid-South West and Causeway Coast and Glens deal moving and ensure that it's there, that would be great.
It's in the bag.
Andrew?
Yeah, no, just one of the things in the programme for government there is the flood risk management, and we're already seeing more intense weather systems. Obviously, Florida's bracing themselves. I'm just wondering what further information on plans, on timescales for something. My South Down was quite badly hit, so there's just always a desire for information in that regard. So again, just what plans on the timescales of how these are being developed to ameliorate against some of these issues?
Yes, well, the flooding in South Down is actually a matter for our Rivers colleagues, who I think are coming up in a few weeks to brief you, so they'll be able to give you some more of the detail. I know that the Flooding Review Group was established and met regularly and have published the report, which is 22 recommendations, but Rivers colleagues will be here in a few weeks and they can give you more detail on that.
Okay, thank you. Cahill?
Just a quick point, Chair, and I welcome the engagement of councils. I mean, I think the validation checklist will be a game changer in terms of moving the process on, but it's important respecting the autonomy of each council and giving them opportunity, and nobody would argue that. But there has to be a consistency of approach right across. And I mean, I hope those part of those conversations they're having.
Absolutely,
that early engagement.
It's a new process, and it's obviously something we are working on. We have engaged already with the heads of planning in terms of providing guidance. That guidance is going to be worked up, and obviously that's something that we'll always be open to discuss with councils. I think everybody will want to be consistent. I mean, we want things have to be fair and transparent for everybody engaging in the process. So we're very, very mindful of that, and again, to establish good practice, but obviously not to interfere with the local issues. So to give the councils their own autonomy on that is important too.
And I think it'll assist. There's no doubt these checklists will assist councils in moving forward.
It's one of many things. Hopefully, there's not going to be one massive big fix, but it certainly will be something that'll help improve the process.
Okay, thank you. Just lastly, is there any risks that other services will be impacted or reduced in order to deliver the programme for government priorities? Do you envisage anything like that?
On the water side, no, not at the moment. The delivery of the Northern Water it falls within the Minister for Infrastructure's responsibility, and so that would be for him then to decide on his budget allocations in terms of that. So going forward, those decisions, I guess, in terms of funding and delivery of those services would fall to individual ministers.
I suppose from a housing perspective, whilst we're not the lead on the housing strategy, the planning system is a key enabler for delivering housing. The SPPS obviously provides that regional framework for any councils that to date haven't presented their local development plans. Happy to report that we're nearly 50% way through the development plan process in terms of planning strategy for each council. But the planning system is very wants to really be an enabler, so to ensure the delivery of housing and not to be a barrier to it. And there's many different policy mechanisms set out in the strategic planning policy statement that assist that. So I don't see that there should be anything that would prevent that.
And sorry, if you don't mind me asking, how long did it take to get that to that 50%?
We just obviously the department have just issued the direction on the Antrim and Newton Abbey plan in the last fortnight. So it has taken obviously since the legislation has changed, but bear in mind that in the last 4 years these plans have gone through public examination, and the department has considered the report from the Plan Appeals Commission on these and obviously given out directions. We're another one in the offing now, which is the Derry City and Strabane District Council Plan. So it has taken time, but these are important documents. They do set the framework for the future for these local areas. They do take time to gather the evidence, and that evidence is very fundamental because that actually should align local policies with regional overarching policies, and that's an important part of the process. The strategy is probably a key document. The next stage is the local plans policy. That will come. But I think it's important to recognise that a lot of work has been put in for the councils to date and the organisations involved in that. So rather than being a negative, it's good to say that we're making progress.
I'm glad you have that positive mental attitude, because I do have concerns in how delivery will match the programme for government, considering how long it has taken for some of these things to get through. Liam, do you want to add anything to that in relation to what you believe might be services that may be reduced or impacted?
I think as a general point, as we go back to the main risk being the challenge, the funding challenge around that, so within that, say the key aspect of us focusing and prioritising those resources where they will be most beneficial to deliver this. Say obviously the Minister has got his decision making role within that, but the officials within the department will gather the various bits of evidence to allow him to make those decisions, to allow him to identify where best he can spend that money to maximise the delivery against the priorities set out within the PFG.
So last question, when and will the committee see and will they have access to those achievements and measurements of the programme for government whenever you're tracking the performance?
So obviously this is a programme for government is led by TAO. So TAO will be leading the monitoring programme, if you want to call it that. I don't know how they plan to interact with all of the committees, but we would obviously be inputting into that.
Okay.
I don't think we have just enough detail on that at the moment.
Okay.
I understand you'll have seen the department's own business plan, and you'll be, so how the department will track its own performance against the programmes and initiatives and actions that are within our business plan that contribute to PFG. They will be reported to you through that process.
Okay. Look, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time today for coming to the committee, and no doubt we'll see you again. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, members, for working with me there. We've obviously just to talk and discuss about some of the themes coming out of that, because the committee we obviously have to correlate a response. So I remind members that the committee for the Executive Office is coordinating the response from statutory committees to the draft programme for government, and has asked that the responses from the committees are provided by the 18th of October. It will therefore be necessary for the committee to agree its response at the next meeting on the 16th of October. So members, what are your key issues or themes or comments that you would like to see included in the response? This will obviously help the committee staff to draft a response for consideration, and then we'll agree that at next week's meeting. So does anybody have any? Well, will I kick off in relation to NI Water? I think was one of the key things that came up there, because that's going to, when you look at the programme for government in terms of the housing strategy, we are very, very well aware of the capacity issues. So I think that's something that we really want to see delivery upon, because I am not sharing the optimism that some of these issues will be scoped out. There was talk about legislative timeframes there in terms of developer-led contributions. We all know how long that takes to get through the system, and they're just at the start of this process. So I think that's maybe a key thing that we would need to respond back in our paper. Don't know if anybody else if you agree with that, or if there's anything else you want to add.
I would agree with that. The thing for me though is we're not actually clear as to what kind of impact it's going to have. So this could all be done, and it has an impact on, and I'm just being hypothetical here, 5 or 10%. It may not have this huge impact, and that we think it may have. And actually, I think there's been noise made already from lobbying groups that's only going to benefit those massive developers that have huge sums of money. So I'm just a little bit sceptical of it, so I need to see more detail on that.
No, again, there are a lot of questions around the developer contributions idea, but I mean, it's mad that they still haven't, I suppose, discovered whether legislation is required or not, or if the virus exists to do it, and if it does, you'd wonder, well, why the heck hasn't it been done before? Point I'd raised with the ministers, like what level of contribution will there be, even from a major developer? Like there's one in Derry that I've referred to. It's going to cost £15 million for a station, so a pumping station. So even if they say to the developer, okay, you have to pay a third of that or half of it, Northern Ireland Water don't have the other 2/3 or the other half, so it's still not going to get done. And the more the developer has to contribute, the more the homes are going to cost, the more the rents are going to be, the fewer social homes will get built. So it's good that they're considering options, but this isn't going to be some magic bullet that sorts stuff out by a long shot.
Yeah.
I would just concur with that as well. Just ultimately, it's going to be the price largely back on the consumer, through shortage of houses, increased house prices and rent as well. So it's a major issue, and I'm not sure the department recognise the scale of it.
Yeah.
And the real catastrophic
and
urgency of it.
I suppose, sorry Stephen for cutting across here, if you want to take it a step further in relation to John's point about unadopted development sites, if developers as well are having to, they build the houses aren't bought, developers go bust, it impacts upon all of that. So there's a vicious never-ending circle there. John, do you want
I would echo those points as well. I think there's serious questions to be asked about that, and it's all well and good for wealthy developers building expensive homes, but if we're looking for the social sector to build more social homes, and we're looking for affordable first-time homes, that's not going to be feasible within putting down major amounts of money as well. So that's only going to impact on the homes that we need first and foremost, and we do have a housing crisis, and we acknowledge that, and I don't sense that housing associations or the housing executive, should they have the power to build these houses, are going to have the additional funds on top of what they don't have at the minute to put down these huge sums. But I would like to, if at all possible, get agreement as well, some sort of a recognition from the department and what needs to be done on adopted roads. I don't think any of us sense just how bad it's got. I think in 2012, Mark, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, there was a DRD committee report done, and a series of suggestions were outlined in terms of what could be done by the department at that stage, and none of them have been implemented, and the problem has got worse and worse. And I think the numbers I'm waiting to see, over 25,000 people now in the country are living on roads unadopted, some for in excess of 20 years. It is lamentable, and if we are truly going to accept these key indicators of good homes, that needs to be in there.
Yeah. Just to add, I think planning is another key aspect, running alongside this as well, and how elongated the process is. In terms of statutory consultees, it was mentioned there about the transformation, but that is only in relation to departmental. That's not in relation to, you still have NIEA, all of that sits outside of DFI. So the time frames for the statutory consultees coming back, in my view, is still going to be an issue there with planning and being able to get those projects over the line. Mark?
It was just a belatedly declaring interest as a living and unadopted.
I think so does the chair.
I still live there. I'm in the process of selling the house.
Let's hope you can.
Actually, yes. Thank you, Mark. I declare
That's a good advertisement, Mark. Don't record that. Don't record that.
What's going to buy it now?
Wait, Chair, let's go back to. Chair, let's go back to ask what we originally asked the questions on.
So we need to formulate our response
to
the executive office.
Right,
So this
is assume that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean the question first. The point, certainly, this question's over. There's going to be an introduction of these things, right? The validation checklists and all to try and address the plan. So I take it then as part of our consultation. There's some issues been raised here and that, but it's about monitoring, reporting and achieving targets. Is that what we are responding on, really? Or what are we? Because are we saying we don't support what do you call it, developer contributions? We're not saying that, are we?
I don't know about it.
We don't have the detail.
And that's the point.
But
That's what I'm asking, and that's how
we don't have
that's how we're formulated. No, that's why I asked John.
So
it's like the validation checklist may be a good thing.
There's lots of
we need to see. That's why I'm trying to develop exactly.
So obviously the programme for government, the main aim of it is, and obviously as politicians and I'm sure executive colleagues will want to ensure that the programme for government is delivered upon. We're raising, I suppose, in this that delivery may be hampered because we're raising some of these things that we have found out within the committee, I suppose, as part of our submission back to the Executive Office, because we need to ensure that these things are put in place so that programme for government is delivered upon.
Oh, 100%. But I mean, if we introduce validation checklist next week, we need to give it 6 months to see how it's working. That's what I'm saying. Like developer contribution, I agree with what Peter says. I mean, maybe you could argue there should have been a scope of work done in terms of, but the suggestions. I'm just asked the question.
Carol, I suppose what we could do in relation to the submission is we can say, look, that the fact of we welcome the fact that there are validation checklists included, and we will have to see how that goes along the process, as was indicated there. They look forward to coming back to the committee to tell us it's all hunky-dory. So we can note that
once
in
we note the
our...
thing, just bring back, saying then we're looking at next week. Is that great? Is that, or when you bring it back?
This report?
Sorry, Chair. It has to be agreed at next week's meeting. Now it'll be probably issued. I know that the Chair is probably going to mention this. Obviously, won't have time to draft it for Friday for inclusion in the pack, but it will be circulated before next week's meeting, so members can see it. So this is just the purpose of this is just to give us an idea of what to draft and what to include in the draft. But it will be obviously subject to members' comment and agreement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just one last thing that I picked up on, Andrea, it was your point around the sort bay arrangements. I think that's really important to get that included in.
I think that,
as well.
that's we're on a level then, so we are, because I was thinking the same thing myself, just about the wastewater going into the rivers here. That is such a key issue, so happy that goes in, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, members, are you content with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, just to add to that, I know that you've raised the key issues here, but there may be some other things from the evidence session this morning that we can incorporate into it as well, such as the financial challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Challenges as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, members, we are running more or less to time, touch wood, so let's keep in that similar vein. Just as the clerk had said, given the timescales, it won't be possible to obviously get it perhaps included in the papers for Friday, but the draft will be included in table papers, so please take a look at that before you come to the committee meeting next week, because we will have to agree that next week given the timescales. Okay, so we're moving on to item 8, which is the Port Review Consultation Department for Infrastructure Oral Evidence. At page 392 is the Clerk's memo, Ports Review Consultation Department for Infrastructure Oral Evidence. At page 395, Ports Review Consultation Department for Infrastructure Written Evidence. And I'm welcoming to the committee today Ms. Sian Kerr, Director of Transport Planning and Policy Department for Infrastructure, Mr. Seamus O'Hare, Head of Gateways Branch Department for Infrastructure, and Ms. Adele Campbell, Gateways Branch Department for Infrastructure. So again, members, I'm just seeking that seeking agreement that the evidence is recorded by Hansard. All in agreement? Yeah. Okay, so thank you for coming to the committee today. We really appreciate your time this morning. As per usual, just 5 minutes, brief opening statement. We do have some written evidence, and then we'll come to members' questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for inviting us here today to brief the committee on the Ports Policy Review. As you've mentioned, I'm joined by my colleagues Seamus, who is head of the Gateways team, and Adele, who works in the Gateways team. If you're content, I'll begin by giving an overview of our ports and why we are doing a review of ports policy. Then I'll talk specifically about the main areas which have been identified for further consideration. Our ports play a vital role in our local economy and are important regional drivers of economic growth. Ports are not only the main gateway for our imports and exports, but we are heavily dependent on the ports for our day-to-day provisions and supplies. 4 out of the 5 main commercial ports, Belfast, Foyle, Warrenpoint and Coleraine, are known as trust ports. The 5th, Larnport, is privately owned. Trust ports are independent statutory bodies, each governed by their own unique statutes and controlled by a local independent board. The chair and members of Belfast, Foyle and Warrenpoint are appointed by the Minister for Infrastructure following a public appointments process. There are no shareholders or owners, and any surplus is reinvested in each port. It has been several years since the Department reviewed its policy relating to ports, and it's fair to say that the context our ports are now operating in is very different from a few years ago, with issues such as climate change playing a significant role in future port plans. As such, it was felt useful to revisit the ports policy and to explore the opportunities that may exist to improve the economic prospects of our ports and, in turn, the local economy. Following engagement with our trust ports, several areas have been identified as starting points for further consideration. These areas include the Office of National Statistics, or ONS, classification, extended commercial powers for trust ports, the harbour order process and new marine safety measures. On the ONS classification, in April 2005, our trust ports were reclassified by the ONS from private non-financial corporations to public non-financial corporations. This is an ONS classification only, and the reclassification has no legal effect whatsoever on the statutory powers, functions or ownership of the trust ports. The main issue the classification change created was an accounting one. It meant that any borrowings by trust ports, irrespective of where the funds came from, now had to be counted against the Department's Capital Delegated Expenditure Limit, or CDEL, budget. This effectively means that trust port borrowings need capital budget cover from the Department, and so this borrowing is effectively competing with other DFI projects, such as road schemes, for scarce capital resources. The proposed solution to changing the ONS classification will require the removal of some of the legislative controls that are exercised by the Department. Extended commercial powers. Extending the commercial powers available to the ports appears to be a relatively straightforward issue and received significant support in the 2006 Ports Policy Consultation and during the consultation on the Strategic Framework for Northern Ireland Ports in 2014. Given the passage of time and changing circumstances, it is an issue that would benefit from further consideration. If greater commercial powers are granted, then it will be important to ensure that appropriate safeguards and practices are in place so that the Department can ensure the ports are efficient and competitive while still operating in the public interest. The harbour order process. Presently, only the Department can make harbour order changes for any harbours. These orders are also all subject to affirmative resolution in the Assembly. We are considering amending the process of how harbour orders are made by bringing them in line with the process used in GB, where the majority of harbour orders are initiated by the Harbour Authority themselves. This means the initial drafting and work is done by the applicant and not the Department. Simplifying the legislative process around amending harbour orders for these statutory harbour authorities, which are not regionally significant, would speed up this process. This simplification would be consistent with GB and would mean making a harbour order revision a less time-consuming and costly process for the Department. And then lastly, marine safety measures. The ports, and in particular Belfast, have written to the Department about the general power of direction that GP ports have under the Marine Navigation Act 2013. No similar power exists in our trust ports, and the ports all want this power, which they say enables them to direct ships and will improve safety at our ports. We have held pre-consultation engagement with our trust ports, and comments and feedback from the ports has been positive and informed the development of the consultation. We are asking you to note the work ongoing to inform a future consultation and seek your involvement in the consultation process. If there is support from the consultation for progressing some of the issues identified, new legislation will be required. The committee will of course be included in the process around any legislation that may be required following completion of the consultation. I hope that overview has been helpful, and we are very happy to answer any questions you may have.
Super, thank you very much. So can I just check what impact or benefits would this have upon the operations of the ports?
In terms of the ONS reclassification,
in terms of the ONS classification, and then I suppose in terms of the marine safety measures as well.
Okay, so I'll pick up on the ONS and then ask Adele to come in on the marine safety. So the ONS one is really around the ability to borrow. So if we look to Belfast Port in particular, they have plans in relation to improving their facilities for the purposes of helping the cruise sector and the renewables sector, and that will require borrowing. And at the minute, that isn't enabled because we haven't got the CDEL cover, as you know, just due to the department's financial situations and how other projects are have asks on the capital budget. So those are the main issue in terms of the ONS classification. Adele, do you want to say anything on the marine safety?
The marine safety legislation, in 2013 there was a Marine Navigation Act was brought in, and that was to amend various legislations throughout all the ports. But there was a section on it that gave in the power of direction over vessels, and that was section 5 and 6, but that does not apply to Northern Ireland ports because that only amends the 1964 Act. And therefore, when the ports have had audits by the Port Marine Safety Code, it's been raised as a issue, and it's now on their risk register that they need to have this legislation brought in for allow them to direct the ports, or direct the vessels around their ports.
Okay. And what ports in Northern Ireland are not trust ports, and therefore will there be any sort of differentiation then for them?
The market in Northern Ireland is slightly different than the rest of the UK. The only private port that we have is Lurgan. There will be no differentiation in terms of, what we're doing is seeking to change the status of the trust ports and free them up commercially. Obviously there are no commercial restrictions on the Port of Lurgan, so there's no particular conflict there between the Port of Lurgan and the trust ports.
Will there be what about marine safety? Will they have now a lesser, I don't want to use that term, but how will marine safety be
Ironically,
impacted?
the Port of Lurgan, their harbour orders from 1998, they're the only harbour that actually have the power direction that the other trust ports are seeking.
Okay.
So it's not going to have any impact on Lurgan in terms of safety. They already have what they require.
Okay. I'm going to move to members' questions. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. Just in terms of the legislative timeframe, should this get the direction of travel that you wish it to have, what is your thought process on that? I'm assuming ideally before the end of this mandate. And can you talk us when we might do a first draft of that?
Yes, well, we still have to finalise the consultation with the Minister, and then that will go out for a 12-week consultation period, which will bring us into early next year. We do have a slot in the legislative programme for 25-26, which we will admit is we're up against it with that time frame, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to hit it. We will have a bit of legislation no matter what for the marine safety that has to be brought forward, but just depending on how the consultation is brought in and what other ports and other ideas have come in, it'll be whether other legislation is added into it. So hopefully by March we'll be able to give you something.
Do you say, Shannon, your original, am I right in saying that there was a previous version of this and a consultation carried out?
Yes.
Yes, and I'm assuming that's still reasonably relevant and that most of the space hasn't changed much.
Yeah.
Could you just talk me through the consultation responses that were at that time potentially negative or at least constructively critical?
It's a while ago, so
maybe you can give it to us.
I'll maybe pick that up. The consultation itself was from 2006.
Yes, and it was
a while ago. Way while ago now, Johnny. It's just a little.
Yesterday in Northern Ireland.
This is memory tested here now. You are right that the issues raised are very much still relevant in terms of the responses. I don't recall any negative responses to the proposed changes. In fact, post-consultation there was a legislative process brought forward and brought through committee at that time. Yeah. We actually got as far as in 2009 having draft legislation, but it actually just run out of time in terms of the mandate then. The mandate was finishing in 2010 and there just wasn't time to bring it through. But these measures had broad support from the committee at the time, from the ports and from port users, and that there were no critical voices that I'm aware of.
Okay, and there's no reason to assume that there'll be anything untoward this time in terms of feedback then? That's grand. Final bit then, you referred to other areas around the UK in terms of other ports. Could you just give an example of maybe best practice and where other changes or similar changes have taken place and the benefits that has had, and just talk us through those.
Yes, well, I'll start and then we bring in Seamus. So in terms of, I think you alluded to this earlier, we have a higher proportion of trust ports than other areas. So in the likes of the rest of GB, there are a far higher proportion in terms of commercial ports. There are some trust ports, and they did have this issue in terms of they were reclassified, and then that brought them into the same situation we were in. In Scotland, they took action to change the legislation, and they have now been reclassified by ONS back into being the private classification. Okay. So I don't know if you have any more detail on that.
Scotland faced the same issue. All trust ports and the departments in England faced the same issue. But Scotland 2015 brought in new legislation that removed and really looking back at the debates that happened there through their legislation whenever it was going through was that the Port of Aberdeen were looking to do a significant investment around 400 million in offshore renewables. The Scottish Executive were saying, look, we just cannot afford this. We do not have the money with the other competing priorities. So that was the real driver for them to change the status. They introduced the necessary legislation. In England, there isn't the same driver. There aren't anywhere near as many trust ports. I suppose DFT are their sponsoring body. And looking back at the latest accounts at DFT that I saw, their budget's 22 billion. So it's probably not as hard for them to find the financial cover. I'm not aware of whether any of the trust ports are doing such significant investments at the same time, but that's the situation in the UK.
Just a point rising. I'll come back. There's one at the end. I'll come back to it unless you really want me to.
Is it quick?
It's very, very short. Will it have any impact on how the Harbour Commission or how the board are set up in terms of how they function?
Well, in terms of the legislative change that needed, at the moment the Minister appoints all board members.
Yes.
That position would, to change the ONS classification, that would need to change to the Minister appointing a minority of the board.
Okay.
But it wouldn't change how the board functions.
But it wouldn't change anything else to do with the business.
That's fine. That's all I need to know, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Cahill?
Thanks, Chair, and I think all the questions have been asked. That effective question has worked. Just my only point, and obviously when we're bringing legislation, we will have to make sure we get it right. But my main question is this: obviously it's a number of years. Seamus, you should do quiz questions. If you remember me back that far, you should.
I think it was.
The thing for me is obviously legislative change. There's requirements for. You often hear this term of, carrot and stick approach when you introduce new regulation. But my main question would be to introduce the main benefits right across all the areas to support the trust. I know you've outlined some of the things, but that primarily what would be the legislation, even in terms of competitiveness or everything else, and safety and everything else.
Yeah, so the ports are assets in terms of Northern Ireland, and they play a very important role. And I think in looking at this, we have to be very careful around balancing, the ability to avail of to be players in the commercial market versus protecting the public interest and safeguarding Northern Ireland assets. So that is very much up front and central in terms of how we are taking forward the review. So yes, on one hand, the ONS classification is about the ability to not constrain the ports around the worthy things they want to do that will ultimately help Northern Ireland. But at the same time, we have to make sure that the public interest is protected.
And just in terms of obviously legislation, and I know you mentioned all the rules around consultations. I mean, and John has indicated there's enough work. There's a lot of work being done there, preparatory work in terms of responsibility. The time frame shouldn't be. No, we're looking within this mandate anyway. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair, yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for coming in today. My first question is kind of a bit, I'm trying to get my head around all this. What are we looking to transfer a trust port? Like, what model are we looking to transfer it to?
So the trust port will still be a trust port. Okay. There's no change in status in terms of it would still be a trust port. The issue is one of accountancy rules and a technical change. So it is about how their borrowing is reflected in the department's books. That's it. But the impact of that technical change, so one day beforehand they could borrow and it didn't show in the books, and then the next day they had to, when they were looking to borrow, it was competing against other capital pressures. That is it in terms of the ONS classification. But the reason they were reclassified was because ONS deemed that there was a level of departmental control that meant they should be on the books. The issue is now about how we lower that, not remove, but lower that control so that it enables them to not be on the books and free up their ability to borrow again.
Okay. And then you'd mentioned positive feedback so far, and I think you'd mentioned to John there about negative feedback, and there hadn't really been that much negative feedback. Is this something that the ports have been calling for a while? It is. Okay.
So I think they have been, like, even before. I think there was an attempt before, the one that we talked with John. I think we looked at this before. So no, this has been a consistent ask, and certainly work had begun on this in the absence of ministers, in terms of, well, look, maybe now is the time to look at this again, because looking at especially Belfast, their future plans, it was going to make a very clear call on budget from the department, which we were with everything else. It was going to be very difficult. So we were very keen to look at it again, and the ports have worked with us in terms of improving our understanding and the impact, where the room for manoeuvre is, what are their priorities versus things that, well, look, we can leave it. But the issue becomes, we'll only probably get one chance to do the legislation. We've tried several times before, and it's trying to work out, well, if we definitely want to do these things in the legislation, what else is worthy for that slot?
At this early stage, does climate change factor into thinking at all? And also, does the quality of the loch? I've heard concerns raised with me about the quality of some of the fish in Belfast Loch, and shellfish specifically. Does that factor in?
That isn't part of this at all, about the quality, but the climate change bit does, because certainly in the case of Belfast and probably Foyle as well, they see part of the opportunities are around offshore wind, for example, and the bringing together of the turbines in the port as being a critical thing for Northern Ireland in terms of meeting its climate objectives. So they are very much playing are trying to play their part in terms of providing those facilities. And also, I think that it's just that bit about those are very much their future plans and an opportunity, given the nature of the port, that they can avail of. So it's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming along. I suppose I think I'm trying to get my head around some of this and such like. I suppose the main thing is just a slight, if we remove legislative oversight, if we remove legislation, are we then losing oversight, if that makes sense? And again, we'll start with that one there. Really, are we losing oversight of these ports?
The particular measures that we're looking to change in terms of the members, there's a power of direction there as well. There is a loss of some oversight powers that the department currently has. Yeah. But I suppose whenever we're looking to free them up commercially in terms of free up departmental budgets and remove that ONS link, that's a balance that has to be struck between, on the one hand, the desire to actually enable the ports to be successful commercial businesses operating commercially, and the public interest. Now, while we're removing some controls, the consultation does touch on all the things that can be introduced. There still are remaining controls, but the consultation also touches on all the things that could potentially be done. I think we very much see it, and it's something the Minister is very conscious of, this public accountability. But, we see accountability as being linked very much to transparency. So to try and make the operations and the future plans of the ports as transparent as possible, and open them up to the widest audience possible at the earliest stage, will actually help improve public accountability. So we don't necessarily think changing these controls will necessarily make accountability worse, but there will be some things removed that are currently there.
Is it okay to have 3 questions? Are we okay for 3 questions?
I'll decide, but keep going. Keep going. That's one question.
So yeah, I get that, and that's all good, but as my colleague Peter touched on about sort of the environmental impact, I'm just wondering, if you remove the controls to increase the commercial, then would that not invariably have an impact on certain environmental points and climate points as well, if you get my meaning?
Worth coming, certainly in terms of, I think the water quality issue is sort of out with this discussion, but I think if we look at certainly Belfast, they have very much embraced the need to decarbonise and to do their part, or play their part in terms of the wider Northern Ireland climate imperative. So they've already invested significantly around, for example, their fleet. Obviously, we're interested from a transport point of view that they have invested, I think it's about £1 million in terms of making their fleet low carbon. So, and they've recently published an ESG report outlining all of the work that they are doing and to help environmental and social issues. So, they are playing their part. I don't think that the changes around, we're talking things like, rather than appointing the whole board, that we're appointing a minority of the board. Each of the boards has councillor representation on the boards. So, there is already that sort of representative impact on the board. So it's more about, it's things like that we're looking to remove. But it's a balance because, it's which is in the greater good, removing some of those controls or being able to access the borrowing, and we can't have both.
Yeah. One more. I suppose the last question really is, and you've touched on this a few times regarding public interest and such like, some of these ports operate in very close proximity to the residential areas. Essentially, they are in fabric of certain towns, if that makes sense. And I suppose really, I'm just, how will again this language of removing legislative control, etc., how will that impact upon the operations, which will then impact upon the people that are part of this community, these communities as well, and how will they be able to feed into this, and how will they be expected, or how can they expect to interact with this legislation? And again, you've already touched on the transparency. It's all very good, but it's the practice of it too, if that makes sense.
I think it's just really important. We're not removing all controls. We're looking at a specific couple of controls that we would need to lower, and that is from the experience we have gained from Scotland, where those were the things that by removing them was to enable the reclassification of ONS. Just bring in Seamus.
Yeah, in terms of it is difficult to talk about. We are not removing all the controls we have in place. They are very limited. We've talked about one of them in terms of appointing a minority of the board. Just to run through, obviously it's difficult, you haven't seen them, but the other ones is a power of direction the department has over activities in the port. That was introduced in 2002 and has never been used, as an example. And the other one is the power to privatise effectively, the power to enforce a sale. So they're the only three controls that we're looking at. They are not necessarily ones that are linked to the issues you've sort of alluded to in terms of the involvement with the community and such things. And I do think it's one of the benefits of the Trustport model overall, as you look at it, the fact that you don't have private shareholders. They can take that wider view and do things that a private company would not necessarily see as making commercial sense, because they have that wider remit in terms of public accountability.
Okay, thank you.
Are you content?
Yep, certainly.
Okay, Mark.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the team for coming in, and a lot of what I might have asked has been touched on. I'm glad to clear that it's just some legislative controls are being removed. The way it was presented to us was just like removal of legislative controls. It didn't say some, but obviously it shared the concerns that some other members have spoken of in that regard. And I mean, you can allay those concerns. You might have already done so, but there are concerns that communities will have as well as committee members. I know you spoke there of ports doing their bit and going green and what have you. You talked about like their own fleets and stuff, but at the same time, like these ports are maybe taking in hundreds of thousands or millions of tons of coal and things like that, and they can like go green and say, oh, we're a carbon-free port. But then the coal company or whoever will just buy a yard as close to the port as possible, and therefore possibly closer to where residents are living. So there are always implications like that. I was just wondering, in terms of free ports, there are no free ports in Northern Ireland, isn't that right? Has the current classification been a barrier to that, and is that driving any of this change?
You want to pick that one from Seamus?
Yeah, there are no free ports, and obviously the free port proposal has disappeared as far as Northern Ireland is concerned. It's been subsumed somewhat into the enhanced investment zones, as I understand it. There were substantial discussions with the ports here, but the Trustport status had nothing to do with that. It just seemed to be, it was DOF were in the lead with the discussions with Treasury on Trustport or on free ports, and those discussions just seemed to get very much bogged down in the detail. So Trustport status itself had nothing to do with Freeports and the fact that they didn't have one here.
No, and as regards the financial implications or implications for the departmental budget and how that might happen, could you give examples of when that has been a problem for the department previously?
Yeah, well, going back in time in history, it maybe hasn't been as much of an issue, but just in last year or 2 years ago, we actually turned a port down for a loan that they were entitled to get through the legislation. The department did not have budget cover. Again, likewise last year, there was a substantial request for funds that the department just had to say, no, sorry, we do not have the money to cover this. So there are practical examples where we're actually turning ports down and saying, sorry, no, you cannot have that money.
And does the department derive any income from our ports, and will extending their commercial powers enable the department to get more out of them?
The ports have the ability to borrow money from the department, so obviously if they borrow money, that money will be repaid.
Ports probably have more money than the department. Can we borrow money off them?
But even, for instance, Belfast have got some budget cover for some borrowings, but they didn't borrow specifically from the department, and that's the anomaly of this. Belfast went to a bank and borrowed money, but the department had to provide budget cover. The department get nothing out of that. There's nothing paid back. Although when Belfast pay that back, the department can draw down that money again. But the department has no commercial interest in the ports whatsoever.
But I think it's important to say, in terms of we talked earlier about, say, the cruise capacity that they want to build up and around the renewables. Those are all contributing directly to the Northern Ireland economy. Right. So, the opportunity may not come back straight to the department, but the benefit to the economy is significant. And I think in terms of, the ability to grow that is a help, both in terms of the economy, but also wider executive goals around decarbonisation and also growing tourism, for example. So, not directly, but, as a whole, yes.
And finally, are there any current legislative impediments to cross-border collaboration? And with our own port, I have a neighbour at Foyle, and with Greencastle just across the loch from it. I know there's bits of joint work have gone on there, but might this present an opportunity to enhance that?
Yeah, so Foyle's a great example in having the ports on either side of the border, but I think more widely, Belfast's looking to work, for example, with Cork around a potential shared island fund bid. So there are opportunities, and I think even in terms of more holistically looking at, for example, cruise, the fact that there are these ports around, you're looking maybe more at different cruise offerings around the island and things. So, there are opportunities for sure, and also in terms of the renewables and the wind. That's given the location of Belfast and Foyle, the opportunity to work, UK and Ireland is there. So yes, I do think there is an opportunity.
And just in terms of the enhanced commercial powers, the proposal the last time did include one to allow that sort of financing to take place. So you could get involved in a project in the Republic of Ireland as well as the North. So that was included within the draft legislation the last time, and that's certainly something that will be looked at again, just in terms of the enhanced freedoms.
Okay, thank you. Cahill, very quickly, please.
Just quickly, Chair, because it's just as we discussed it and go to Consultation. I mean, Belfast, even with their local area plans and everything else, the big plans. I mean, this will be a major asset and opportunity for them. My question is, in light of all the questions being asked, we need to get out there and be consulting them, give them an opportunity, because I think there's good opportunities. But when you do legislation, make sure the checks and balances is always there. And I mean, that's the important thing. But my point, Chair, around the question is to ensure that those, especially those councils that are impacted by it, need to engage with it. Because I think there's opportunities, but there's a few. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can I just clarify, where do ports borrow from?
So they can borrow from, they have the option potentially, if we had budget cover, to borrow from ourselves, but they can also borrow privately. But in either case, the cover has to come through our budget. So there's the very real scenario where I think that Seamus mentioned, a port could look to borrow from a bank, but the amount they need to borrow still has to show in our budget.
Yeah. So in terms of just so that I'm clear, so in terms of the department, what would the risk be of these changes, what would the risk be to the department?
The risk isn't really probably in terms of it not happening, is the fact that we are not able to provide budget cover for the port's plans.
Yeah.
The risk around it happening are limited in terms
well,
of...
there's nothing financially, there's no risk in terms
Yeah.
of the risk comes on the side of the few controls we are removing. You know, is there a decision taken, is there a view that reduces public accountability that can't be addressed in some other way? So that's, if you want to call it a risk, but you know, that's something that I think the legislative process and the consultation will be more than capable of handling.
And from what I'm hearing today, it seems like all ports have a real willingness to be able to borrow and be able to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, the ports operate commercially. You know, government finance and the way it works doesn't really sit with a commercial business. You know, they need to budget in advance to know exactly what you're going to spend this year. You know, the ports just need to be they would argue that they need to be a bit more agile in that. If they need to purchase a piece of land or something, government accounting rules aren't flexible enough for the way they would ideally like to operate.
Look, members, I think everybody's content here. So, look, thank you very much for your evidence today. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to scrutinising the bill and the legislation as it comes forward. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, folks, just before Yannick, no, sorry, thank you very much. Just before Andrew does have a work experience student here today, so I meant to say at the very start of the committee meeting, welcome to the committee. I hope you've enjoyed listening in and seeing it. So we're grateful that you've sat in and listened to us today. So I hope you're enjoying your work experience. Good to see you. All the best. Okay, so members, we're just going to move to item 9, which is SL1, the Trunk Road T3 Western Transport Corridor, Sion Mills North to Ballygawley West, Order Northern Ireland 2024, Department for Infrastructure, Oral Evidence. At page 399, you'll see the Clerk's Memo, 5 Western Transport Corridor Oral Evidence. At page 3 of the table pack, you'll see the SL1, the Trunk Road T3 Western Transport Corridor, Sion Mills North to Ballygawley West, Order Northern Ireland 2024. This replaces the original SL1 at page 401 in the meeting pack. At page 405 409, you'll see the SL1 private accesses on the A5 Western Transport Corridor, Sion Mills North to Ballygawley West, stopping up Order Northern Ireland 2024 and accompanying maps. So following the Minister's announcement of the decision on how to proceed with the A5 Western Transport Corridor, the Department has provided 2 proposals for statutory rules for the consideration by the committee. Given the significant amount of information underpinning the scheme, much of which is technical, thankfully, we have departmental officials who have been invited to brief the committee on the SI1. So inform members that the committee will consider its position on the SL1s following the oral evidence session. So I'm welcoming to the committee today Mr. Colin Hutchinson, Director of A5 and Active Travel, Department for Infrastructure, Mr. Seamus Keenan, Deputy Director of the A5 Western Transport Corridor, Department for Infrastructure, and David Miller, Road Service Department for Infrastructure. And I'm just seeking agreement that the evidence is recorded by Hansard today. So obviously there's a huge amount of documentation there. I know it's very difficult, but if you could briefly, in 5 minutes, sort of outline yourselves in terms of it all, and then I want to come to members' questions on it. So thank you for your time today.
Chair and members for the opportunity to be here. Delighted to be here at this stage. It's fantastic. I'm going to be very short in my introduction, and I'm going to hand over to David to take you through the details. So we're here to hopefully get your positive consideration of the direction order and the stopping up order. And Seamus and I are here to basically hopefully answer any queries that you might have thereafter. So on that note, I'll hand over to David to take you through the detail.
Well, good morning, members. So as part of the Minister's decision to proceed with the A5 scheme, he also advised that he instructed officials to progress the necessary statutory orders. So the two statutory orders to be made are the Trunk Road Order, which is more commonly referred to as a direction order, and the Stopping Up of Private Accesses Order. So these are explained in the two SL1s in front of the committee today for consideration. The other orders to be made are the three vesting orders. So it's one to cover the section from the project from north of Sion Mills to south of Omagh, one to cover the section from south of Omagh to west of Ballygawley, and the third to cover additional lands for environmental and flood alleviation or mitigation measures. So the vesting orders are administrative orders, so they're not subject to assembly procedures. These are orders that the department just makes ourselves. And when they come into operation, that's the date when we lodge them in Land Registry to vest the department's title and register the department's title. So in this case, we're aiming for the vesting orders to become operative on the 25th of November. So hopefully following your consideration and the making of the Trunk Road Order and the Stopping Up of Private Accesses Order and the vesting orders, then the department will place a statutory notice in the local papers, which formally advises the public of the Minister's decision to proceed, the making of the orders and when they come into operation. So the last date that notice appears in the papers sets the date of the start of the 6-week period that anyone can lodge a legal challenge on the grounds to the High Court to the validity of the decision to proceed on the grounds that it's not within the department's powers or that any part of the environmental statement, impact assessment procedures set out in Part 5 of the 1993 Roads Order have not been complied with. It also starts the 1-month period for any legal challenge to the High Court to the validity of making the vesting orders on the grounds that they are not within the powers of the department or that the statutory procedures have not been followed. So we're aiming for the statutory notice to appear in the papers week commencing the 21st of October. So that will mean the last date the notices will appear in the papers is the 25th of October, Friday the 25th, which is in the Belfast Gazette, which means the 6-week period for the legal challenge will end on Friday the 6th of December. So with regard to communicating to landowners affected by the vesting orders and the decision to proceed, we'll be writing to them to advise the vesting order relating to their land has been made and attaching a copy of the Minister's decision to proceed and copy extracts of the vesting schedule and map relating to their lands. At that time, we also advise them that they should appoint an agent to assist and advise them in grain accommodation works and in due course assist them in submitting their compensation claim. We also advise them that the department will pay all reasonable costs for the appointed agent and reasonable legal costs in providing proof of their title so that we can pay them their compensation monies. We also provide them with the Land and Property Services Compensation Form for their agent to complete and submit in due course. We also advise them that they can immediately submit a 90% advance payment for the value of the land vested from them as assessed by LPS. However, experience is the agents generally advise their clients to wait till the scheme is completed and all the accommodation works done before submitting their full claim. All landowners will receive a copy of the department's guidelines for the acquisition of land and property for major road development in Northern Ireland. So that's quite a significant brochure that we pulled together and developed with the assistance of DAERA and the Ulster Farmers Union. And that's intended to inform and advise the farmers and landowners on the development process the department adopts when bringing forward proposals for major improvement schemes. It also sets out the landowner's rights to entitlements to compensation and the types of accommodation works that they may wish to consider. So also the Minister's decision and all the relevant associated documents will be made available online and also placed for inspection in the local council offices, the DFI offices and Monaghan and Donegal County Council offices. So just to summarise the main point, which is maybe the date most people are interested in, is following publication of the statutory notice to proceed in the local papers, the 6-week period for any legal challenge will end on Friday the 6th of December.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come to members' questions in a wee moment. Obviously, this is very pertinent to myself, even though I am chair of the committee. Friday the 6th of December is obviously the main date. After that, can anybody take a legal challenge after that, even during construction works?
Well, if members will recall, on the A6 Ronaldstown to Castledawson, the gentleman who took the legal challenge there, Mr. Murphy, that was 9 months after the 6-week period, and we still had to go to court to defend that legal challenge. So if the legal challenge comes, depending on what it is, depending on the timing, we still have to deal with it.
There's maybe just a clarification there. So it's the legal challenge on the minister's decision.
Yes.
Would be at this point. Would be at that point in time, and then at future, if something were to happen that somebody felt that they should take a legal challenge on, they have the right to do that.
So at that stage, then, what would happen to the vesting processes and the stopping up orders?
If there were a challenge received at that point in time, so if we do get a challenge, and we're very live to that being a potential position that we'll be in, we'll have to give careful consideration to the strength of that challenge at the time, before the minister then will make a decision on exactly how he moves forward. But with regard to the vesting order would be made at that point in time, and there would be nothing from a legal perspective to stop us continuing on until such times as a court would tell us that we have to stop.
Okay, so I had noticed that the stopping up order has been modified and changed since 2016. What was the modifications that were made?
I think there were only minor modifications in relation to the actual entrances themselves, where there were a couple of them were widened at the request of the landowners. I think that's what the modification was, but it was minor modifications, but it was slight modifications from when the actual notices were advertised. But that was following consultation with the landowners involved. And I haven't got the information in front of me here, just which landowner it was, but it was one of the two that we modified it.
Yes.
Yeah, if I could add to that as well, the order at that time in 2016 would have been whole scheme, and now we're dealing with a certain stretch of the scheme, so likely the number of accesses there has reduced considerably.
Okay, and how many did that relate to, that modification? Is it a small number then of landowners?
Well, the stopping of private accesses order only relates to 2 entrances.
Yeah.
So it was just there was more entrances for the whole scheme, but it was brought down to just the 2 properties with their entrances.
And they were content, so that's the
content.
reason why then it wasn't re-advertised or anything like that then. So then, you've talked about the timescales in terms of the notices going in, then what about the timescales for the actual hedging or fencing along that? Because for landowners that is a key thing in terms of the construction work, because if they can't access their land. So really what I'm asking is how long will landowners see fencing on their sites and construction work taking place in that time frame, so that they can access or can't access their land?
So given that it's 55 kilometres in length, no contractor is going to be in all of the land on day one. So the key message for landowners is that you continue to farm your land until such times as we have a detailed programme from the contractor, and the contractor actually discusses that with you and gives you an advance notice of when that's going to happen. Our intention at this point in time is to get on, once the land becomes the department's, is to get on a lot of that land to complete archaeological investigations, which have been ongoing for quite a period of time, but there's been certain lands that we haven't been permitted access by agreement onto, so it will complete that and de-risk the construction from that perspective, to complete geotechnical investigations and to complete environmental surveys, which are all needed to inform the detailed design that the contractor will take forward. So our intention is to once we own the land or get past the objection period, that we will enter the land to do that. In the new year, it's currently planned that we would be going onto the lands to do site clearance and fencing to accommodate that site clearance, because it's seasonal. If we don't get that down outside the bird nesting season, it becomes much more difficult and much more problematic to actually do that. So that's the current sort of time frame moving forward in the next few months.
That would be in a small area?
It would be to cover as much of the site as we could, but there's, no matter how much of the country's workforce we could get to do that, you still couldn't do it all in the one go. So it's going to be programmed over a period of months. The important message, I think, for landowners is that we will be, once we have the contractor completely on board, we will be visiting each landowner with the contractor to give them advanced notice about when we intend to come on, and to work with them to accommodate any specific needs that we have, which is not new. That's what we do in these types of schemes. Like, they may have a specific need. I need access to that particular field for another 3 months. What can be done? And we can, in most cases, accommodate that type of thing. So for many landowners, they'll continue to have full access to their land for many months to come.
Okay. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for this information. You referred to the A6, and no doubt you've been involved in other vesting schemes and major capital projects. I'm right in saying this is probably the most significant, 55 kilometres long. It's a bit of a beast. What are your major concerns, if there are any? What's potentially keeping you awake at night, or given your experiences in previous ones, or are you happy that everything's going in the direction it should be right now?
Up until now, it was getting that decision that was made last week. That was the biggest challenge for us to get to that point. Moving forward, we move into a completely different chapter here now.
Yes.
And the first challenge we have is to get the contract, get the terms agreed with the contractors to allow us to swiftly move forward and start the works next year. But look, the biggest scheme that we have taken forward up until now was the Derry to Dungiven, Drumna to Dungiven scheme, and it's 25.5 kilometres long. It's big.
Yeah.
This is 2 schemes. So if we look at it as one is 30 kilometres and the other is 23 kilometres. So we've done it before. So at this point in time, I have no significant risks that I wouldn't have with any other project at this point in time moving forward. The one thing that hangs over the A5 is the history and the potential legal challenge.
Thanks, Colin. The Chair referred to the farmers and the land issues. Can you just give us an idea how many farmers are affected overall? In terms of the engagement with them, just around valuation, you maybe point me to LPS. If they have a dispute over valuation about the impact, not just the loss of land, but the impact on their ability to farm, do they take that dispute up with LPS directly in terms of valuation, and can they appeal that?
So a couple of points there. I think there's just over 300, maybe 315 or thereabouts landowners on the section that we're authorising now, and about 415 on the overall scheme. As Davey mentioned, the vesting packs will go out to them with a lot of information in there. Key message for us is, if you haven't already done so, get an agent on board. We are going to hold clinics jointly between ourselves and LPS in the coming months, and landowners will be made aware of that, and that will be to answer any questions that they have. We also intend to meet with all of the agents collectively, so that we ensure that we're paying the agents here to do this job, so we want to make sure that they're doing that job and that they're getting the right messages out there. If when it comes to the point in time that a claim or a claim's put in and there isn't agreement, there will be to and fro. That's how this works. There is the opportunity for the landowner to take the case to the Lands Tribunal, which is in the High Court, and they will then make a decision on it. So there are avenues for resolving any disputes that could occur, but there are, percentage-wise, it's a very, very, very small percentage of cases that end up there.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Would it be possible if we could get a copy of the vesting pack just to see what that looks like in terms of going out to landowners? It might just be useful to inform ourselves in the Infrastructure Committee.
Absolutely,
that would be great. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, folks, for the presentation. Just a point or two around the budget of the scheme, and I raised this with the Minister the other day in his statement that the budget specifically wasn't mentioned, but I do notice within the website there is more detail on that. But just to suppose, it's huge figures, 2.1 billion for the overall scheme, 1.2 for the first part of the scheme. You know, how confident are you that that will be enough money, I suppose? And secondly, how confident are you that you will be able to afford it ultimately?
We've done a lot of work in this front,
Yeah.
and we have liaised with colleagues across the water down south to try and understand where the market is. The reality is here that in Northern Ireland we haven't tendered a road scheme of this sort of significance since 2017, which was the A6 Dundonald to Drumna. We've had the hyperinflation, we've had the COVID, Ukraine war, and all the other issues that influenced that. So there's always going to be an element of doubt in the figures that we have, but we spent many months over the past 6 and 9 months reviewing the cost estimate for both the entire scheme and the scheme that we've got at the moment, and we are confident that those figures are robust to deliver the scheme, with the caveat that anybody's going to have, we use indices which are used across the UK, and the indices will give you a month-on-month anticipated increase for inflation, and at the moment I think we're applying an average of somewhere just below 4% across the completion of the scheme. If we go into a situation where we have something similar to the Ukraine war or COVID again, that would be horrible. But it would potentially cause hyperinflation again, which is something that we don't budget for, because if we were to budget for that, we'd never build anything at all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but don't underestimate the scale of the project. is enormous, certainly. Just final question in terms of time frames. The Minister talked about 5 years and so on. Again, what's your assessment of that, where we are today?
Yeah, the contractors that we have on board are contractors that have been involved in the scheme since appointed maybe in 2009. They've gone through a few iterations in this. They know the scheme. It's unlike most schemes where even if you have a contractor brought on early, it's only for maybe 12 months or 24 months. So they know the schemes, they know the landowners, they know they've been through their design a dozen times, refining it. I would be confident that they will deliver on the programmes that they have put forward. So I think the first section will go. The current programme is next year, and the second section, the southern section, will go then in 2026. So that's where the 5 years comes from. I think it's a 4-year construction period for the first, but the second section runs a year behind. So again, confident at this point in time, but we need to get on to clear to complete the archaeological investigation and de-risk the job before we start the construction, and that things like that could throw up other issues for us. But we do a lot of work on risk management. That's part and parcel of the job, and we've looked to identify as many of the usual risks and the unforeseen risks as we possibly can to build that into that programme.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Keith.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen, for coming along. I have a couple of questions. I saved my questions from the last section to this. Partly a little bit.
Sorry, what did he say?
So, with respect to vesting, with respect to vesting, if that land's vested from a farmer at a specific date and he or she can use that land, will that have any impact to their final claim? No. Definitely not. No. Okay. Second question, you're talking about 315 farmers. What's the definition of a land agent, your definition, and is there enough of land agents to service 315 farmers adequately, effectively and properly?
What's the definition of a
land agent?
So there'll be a chartered surveyor.
So is an estate agent a land agent?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So any estate agent can be classified as a land agent?
Yeah, a chartered surveyor.
So the contract is the landowner who appoints the land agent. So the contract is between the landowner and the agent. So in theory, it's up to the landowner who decides. But there's lots of agents out there who are well versed and well experienced in schemes, in the A6 schemes, etc. and down around it. So they could appoint a solicitor to be their land agent if they wanted. So it's really up to the landowner.
And are there enough? That's a good question, and that's part and parcel of the reason that we want to engage with them all to see who they are, what they are. Not only engaging with the land agents, but with the landowners, and if they have concerns about the agents, we'll take that on board and address them.
I dealt with a few land agents on the A32 Markerfell bypass and the A6 Castle Dawson part, right? And there only seemed to be a few doing several farmers. But this is a massive scheme with 315 farmers. My concern is, yes, not any estate agent can technically do that job if they've never done it. They could probably learn it, but that's going to be to the detriment of the farmer. So my concern is that farmer going to be well enough represented? He or she just wants to farm land. They're not an expert in this. And the process I've seen failed the farmer. Those farmers were talking back 2014-15 with Joe Bloggs from DFI and agreed something. And the farmer just wants to farm. A couple of 5 years later, Joe Bloggs was gone. Sorry, we have no record of that. Joe Bloggs was the person who took the negative impact of that. So my advice to any farmer, everything in black and white. Absolutely everything. And with respect, because I've seen several farmers, people doesn't realise the impact on a dwelling. So we all go to the bathroom at night or we walk across our living room or lantern. Imagine the impact that stopped. But on just 315 farmers been massively impacted here. And final question, are you content with that? Are you content that the farmers will be adequately dealt with? I've seen severe negative impacts on the A32. So I'm concerned about that. You can obviously pick that up. I'm concerned that they won't be represented properly and effectively by DFI in conjunction with the land agent.
I think from our perspective, the fact that we will have open avenues for landowners to come and speak to us and raise any concerns, that's the avenue for them. You know, the first protocol is that they appoint an agent and they appoint a good agent and they get the service that they need from them, and if they're not getting that service from them, then they need to speak to us, and then we need to, as a department, look at what we can do to influence the number of them. There are plenty of estate agents who have carried out this role. Some have done hundreds of them, some have done a handful of them, but they know how to value land, and that's what their main the main part of this is valuing the land and valuing the impact that the scheme has had on the landowner.
I was just going to add that. So part of the process of agreeing accommodation works with a farmer is that the engineers meet with the agent, meet with the farmer on site. They agree what the accommodation works are going to be. Then that's listed, and the farmer signs that off. So that's on record. So I'm surprised they're saying that those weren't followed through. So there is a record of what the farmer agrees, and the agent agrees in relation to accommodation works.
You can have, and this will comment.
Very briefly.
You can have an agreement on site about concrete posts or wooden posts, around a laneway. You know all that, and then that gets lost in translation.
But it will be on record, so it shouldn't get lost.
And I think the main thing there is just that is set out very, very clearly in the vesting packs. A ticket it will be whenever that all goes out to landowners.
The agent and so on.
Yeah, in terms of all of that process.
So the process of agreeing accommodation works and so on has been gone through a few times, but there will again be no doubt discussions on that, and when the contractor comes on board there'll be further discussions about temporary accommodation works and so on and so forth that will be required. So we're here to do to build the scheme, and at the same time make sure we have the minimalist the most minimal impact on the landowners that are there, and there's always going to be some examples of bad ones. I can take you to loads of farmers that we have long since left, and they would give us a good review, even though they wouldn't have done whenever we were there at the time. But
thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the guys for coming on, and well done. Well done on the work that yourselves and your team have done in getting the Minister to be in a position and the Executive in a position to make that decision last week. A couple of questions, but now I'm sort of going to hook on to what Keith had been asking. Even a silly boy like me will chance his arm at some of this stuff, and it's around the role of agents, because I think it says the agents they're working for us, yet the contract is between the landowner and the agent. Is it still the case that the agent doesn't get paid till the deal is done, everything's done and dusted, and therefore, given potentially negative experiences, Keith spoke of ones of landowners, but I mean potentially of agents who've been agents for landowners for 15 or 20 years on some schemes without seeing a penny, basically due to delays. Has there been any thought given to how that could be improved in any way?
Historically, it was a difficulty for agencies, especially when for big schemes where we're bringing them to a stage where we've made the orders and we park them until such times, for a couple of years the funding becomes available for the scheme, etc. So what we've done now is for the agents themselves, when they get to the stage where they agree the accommodation works with the landowner, then they can submit a claim for costs at that stage. And then once the scheme is built, and then they start their main work on the actual compensation claim, and towards the end of the scheme, then they'll receive another payment then. So they potentially they'll be able to get a stage payment fairly early on once they conclude the accommodation works agreements process and get it signed off.
Yeah, it's important. I suppose that we take the route of least resistance.
It's not a great business model for agents, if they have to wait so long for their money. So we're conscious of that, and we've tried to put something in place. But the agents are generally content with.
And inevitably that can contribute to the focus that they might put on particular issues, and landowners feel maybe times underserved in that regard. No, that's about it. Other points have been covered. I share concerns around budget and the impact of lack of budget on timeline, but I may hope things go well. And just one other thing, I think it's important. No. It's more a point than a question, Chair, but I'll turn it into a question. I think it's important that given that this isn't going to be done overnight, it's going to take a long time to do, and there's been much understandable elation and celebration around the result, but that a focus remains on the dangers that exist on the current A5 route, and that it's not like everyone's going to live happily ever after and those dangers have gone. I think we need to keep the reminders going out around how dangerous road that is.
Absolutely, and I think the Minister mentioned, or in one of the questions that he answered on Monday, he mentioned the fact that we continue to invest, continue to monitor the safety of the A5 along with BSNI, and continuing to invest. I think there was maybe this year something around £1 million spent on lining and carriageway or cat's eyes and carriageway reflectors at the side of the road and so on, and resurfacing, and it's that will continue on as we build the scheme.
No, absolutely. It goes for whatever road we're travelling on. It's important that we all have a duty upon ourselves when we're driving behind the wheel of a car or vehicle. But look, I think members were all content for now. Look, we appreciate you coming up today for taking our questions and for your... Keith, sorry.
Just a wee quick question, gentlemen. With respect to the point of vesting, what point in time does LPS base the figure of land value?
On the date of the vesting order becoming operative, so that's 4. If we got that date, it's 4 weeks in a day from
basically from the 13th of November. It'll be made, and hopefully on the 25th of November. Sorry, I'll come into operation the 25th of October.
Okay, so roughly around that date, so LPS
from the date of
makes a
operation,
valuation on land based on that time frame.
Yes. So if they get interest paid from that date, no matter when.
Point of vesting, yeah, okay. And interest at
Bank of England. It's Bank of England rate.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Cahill, quick point, please.
Just a quick point, Chair, because it's important, because I appreciate all the questions, but there's been a major campaign on this from people out there who lost loved ones and everybody else, and it's an important project. Just to say that in case anybody's listening in this, we don't want to paint a negative picture. There's questions that are answered today in terms of moving forward. I want to get that message out to whoever needs to be, but I will say this, Colin, to be fair, there has been a lot of discussions even with farmers for a number of years now. It's not as if this project has popped up over the last 2 years. There's been a lot of discussions, but the key element after today is get the message out and work with whoever we can to deliver it. because there's other people on the other side of all this here. We are dealing with it from a legislative point of view today, and that's the important thing from the committee chair. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today. We really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, members, we have our job to do now. So I refer members to the first SL1 beginning at page 3 of the table pack, the Trunk Road T3 Western Transport Corridor, Sion Mills North to Ballygawley West, Order Northern Ireland 2024. The rule will be subject to negative resolution. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content? Okay. Refer members to the second SL1, the private accesses on the A5 Western Transport Corridor, Sion Mills North, Ballygawley West, stopping up order, Northern Ireland 2024. The rule will not be subject to assembly procedure. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content? Okay. Thank you, members. Item 10 is SR 2024-165, the Armagh Road Moy Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2024, from pages 411 to 417, documents in relation to the statutory rule. At page 418 is the Examiner of Statutory Rules 23rd report of the session 2023-2024. The rule is subject to negative resolution. Inform members that the purpose of the rule is to abandon an area of 2,583 square metres of superseded road adjacent to the Armagh Road Moy from a point of 99.5 metres south east of the junction of Old Bog Road and Armagh Road, extending for a length of 212 metres in a southeasterly direction. On the coming into operation of the rule, the department will no longer be responsible for maintenance of the area of the road in question, and the public right of way over it shall be extinguished. Remind members that the committee agreed it was content with the proposal for the statutory rule at its meeting on the 11th of September 2024, and I inform members that the Examiner of Statutory Rules had no comments to make on the technical aspects of the statutory rule. Are members content with the statutory rule? Okay, so the motion is that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2024-165, the Armagh Road Moy Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2024, and has no objection to the rule. Thank you. Okay, item 11 is SR 2024-166, the Moyraverty Centre, Craigavon Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2024, from pages 431 to 439, documents in relation to the statutory rule. The rule is subject to negative resolution. Inform members that the purpose of the rule is to abandon an area of 452 square metres of road to the rear of number 87 Larkfield Meadows, Moyraverty, Craigavon. The area of road in question will be abandoned as the department is of the opinion that it is no longer necessary. On the coming into operation of the rule, the area of road in question shall be maintainable by the department, and the public right of way over it shall be extinguished. So I remind members that the committee agreed it was content with the proposal for the statutory rule at its meeting on the 11th of September 2024. Inform members that the Examiner of Statutory Rules had no comments to make on the technical aspects of the statutory rule. Are members content with the statutory rule? Okay, so the motion is that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2024-166, the Moyraverty Centre, Craigavon Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2024, and has no objection to the rule. Okay, thank you. We now move on to item 12, which is the SL1 Coopers Mill Park, Dundonald Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2024. At page 441 is the SL proposal for the statutory rule. The rule will be subject to negative resolution. The rule will abandon an area of 16.41 square metres of former road to the rear of the footway fronting number 1D, Coopers Mill Park, Dundonald. The proposal has been requested by a developer who is the owner of the bed and soil of the area to be abandoned to facilitate a housing development. Following the abandonment, the area will revert to the owner of the bed and soil. The area of the former road is being abandoned retrospectively in order to regularize the situation on the ground, as the area has already been incorporated within the boundary of a new property. No objections were received in response of the consultation for the rule. So I just wanted to suggest that maybe the committee ask the department for clarification of what the situation on the ground actually is, that it proposes to regularise this statutory rule. Obviously we're talking an awful lot today about people and properties and abandonment and unadopted sites, so I'm not saying that's the case in this, but obviously just to seek a wee bit of clarity on it. Is that okay? Content with that? Okay, item 13 is SL1, the Drumna Walk Lurgan Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2024. At page 445 is the SL1 proposal for statutory rule. The rule will be subject to negative resolution. The rule will abandon 809 square metres of superseded road at Drumna Walk Lurgan, comprising 2 areas of road consisting of 88 square metres commencing at a point 24 metres southeast of its junction with the Ansborough Road, and 721 square metres commencing at a point of 79 metres northeast of its junction with Ansborough Road and extending for 121 metres in a northeasterly direction. The proposal has been requested by a solicitor on behalf of a developer to facilitate a housing development. The department and the developers own sections of the bed and soil to be abandoned, with a proportion of land unregistered. Following the abandonment, the land in the department's ownership will be declared surplus and disposed of in accordance with the procedures for the sale of government-owned land. The developer has expressed an interest in acquiring the land. The abandonment is being carried out retrospectively in order to regularise the situation on the ground, as the areas of superseded road have been incorporated into a housing development that has already been constructed. No objections were received in response to the consultation, but again, I'm just wondering if members are content or have any comments to make in relation to this, but I'm suggesting that the committee ask the department again for clarification in terms of what the situation on the ground is, that it proposes to regularise the statutory rule and the implications of the land not being abandoned, given that the areas of superseded road to be abandoned have been incorporated into a development already constructed. Are you content with that? Yeah. Okay. Item 14 is subordinate legislation. SR is not subject to assembly procedure. Advise members that there's one statutory rule that is not subject to assembly proceedings and is not required to be laid. This is at pages 449 of the meeting pack, and is SR 2024-175, the Cycle Routes Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2024. So I'm asking members if you are content to note the statutory rule. Content. Yeah. Item 15 is the subordinate legislation SL1 not subject to assembly procedure. Advise members that there are 5 proposals SL1 for statutory rules that are not subject to assembly proceedings and are not required to be laid. These are listed pages 454 to 472 and are the SL1, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Belfast Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2024, SL1, the Parking Places Disabled Persons Vehicles Amendment Number 4 Order Northern Ireland 2024, 15.3, SL1, the Parking Places Disabled Persons Vehicles Amendment Number 5 Order Northern Ireland 2024, SL1, the Parking Places on Roads Electric Vehicles Order Northern Ireland 2024, and SL1, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Londonderry Order Northern Ireland. So I'm asking members if they have any issues they wish to raise on the proposals. No issues? Okay, so I'm asking members, are you content with the proposals for the statutory rules? Content. Okay, item 16 is proposals in a range of road traffic and vehicle policy areas. Department for Infrastructure written briefing at page 474. Proposals in a range of road traffic and vehicle policy areas. Department for Infrastructure written briefing. And 4 members that the department has helpfully provided an overview of decisions taken by the Minister relating to a number of road traffic and vehicle policies, namely the drink and drug driving, graduated driver licensing and illegal use of mobile phones. The Department has commenced a number of strands within these areas and has undertaken to keep the committee informed of these as a work in progress. I think it was really welcome to see the new drug testing equipment that has been rolled out. And police are rolling that out as well in relation to road safety, and it's welcome to see that some of these measures are coming out and coming more to the fore. So I'm asking members, have you any issues that you wish to raise? No? Happy then to...
Yeah. Chair, on that, the GDL stuff.
Yes.
Like, it's all very good until the end, and it's like this proposal is currently unfunded.
Yeah.
We know the issues, but it's just maybe if we could go back and see how we as a committee can support the Minister in any bid for funding he's making to the Executive in this regard, given the cross-cutting nature of road safety.
So we do have the departmental officials up on the budget on the October monitoring round. Do you want to keep the question till then, Mark?
Maybe that's an idea.
Yeah, keep a wee note of that.
Yeah, no, I'd also be concerned around the drink driving fixed penalty notices for such a serious offence.
Yeah. And do you wanna check up on any elements of that, or?
Happy to raise it when they're in.
Okay. Okay, content members to move on. Yeah. Okay, so the forward work programme is at 17. At page 483 is a draft forward work programme. I seek agreement with members to proceed with the evidence sessions as set out in the draft forward work programme and to reflect any decisions today. All content with that? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the last item is any other business. Has any members have any other business that they wish to raise?
We'll discuss briefly visiting NI Water. What's...
Chair, if you want, I'm in contact with NI Water. It's potentially going to be the 13th of November, which was the same day as the launch of the active travel. But I think the one that NI Water suggests might be Moyraverty, which I think is some distance away from Craigavon, so I don't think you could do both on the same day. I think so.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So
I seen your face.
And the intention, Chair, is obviously to do the visit and then to hear from NI Water on the capacity constraints. I know that's been raised a number of times.
And that's for water treatment coming out of the loch now? Not
it's for, yes, for drinking.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Mark?
There's an issue, and I know much has been made of, and rightly so, the impact of Northern Ireland Water's troubles on development. But I've just come across an issue in my constituency, and I know it's not exclusive to this. One development had raised it with the Communities Minister during the week in the Assembly. It's where you have a social housing development. There's 98 brand new, beautiful homes, and they're sitting ready a couple of months. Families have been told you're getting them, but they're not in them yet, because there's been an issue around the discharge of planning conditions. Now, I'm not pointing the finger and saying that's the developer's fault, that's the Department for Infrastructure's fault or whatever. It is in DFI's court now, as I understand, and it's potentially down to resource issues within their development control section or something. But I don't know, could we write the department and get some sort of understanding how much of an issue that is across the piece? Like, it's one thing responding to a planning application, and we know the difficulty they have in that, but here now, when you're out the other end almost, and it is impacting on people in severe housing crisis.
So you would like to find out how much of an issue that is across Northern Ireland?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I said, the developer might not be faultless in this regard, I'm not saying that, but they should be knocking heads together and getting it sorted.
I can get that raised. Thank you. Okay, members content? Yeah. Okay, so the date, time and location of the next meeting, just before you run, there is an informal meeting today arranged with the National Association of Funeral Directors, which will be held in room 106 at 2 p.m. today. They had corresponded to see if myself and the chair would meet, and we agreed informally, so that is open to yourselves to come along to that. The next formal meeting will take place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday 16th of October at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, 16th of October, 2024,
10 a.m.
in room 29, Parliament Buildings. Thank you, everybody, and I now adjourn the meeting.
Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound.